In a world that walks the line, there's a rare few who think outside the box together for the crew. To break the equations, not bound to any rule. Exposing to the world the universe's own view. It takes the talent of the craftsman, it takes the mind of the fool, to make the vision realize energy and matter in a duel. To a break, to a duel.
Hello everyone, my name is Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Builds. We got Joe here today. Guys, we're talking about divergence of physics from engineering. So it should be a good topic. What's going on, Joe?
Hey everybody. Hey Nathan. Yeah, no, it's a great topic for this week. We have definitely something that's identifiable in the science and engineering community, where we've had a bit of a paradigm shift over the last couple of decades. And that paradigm shift is oftentimes technological advancement and science sort of followed philosophy. So philosophy and theory being sort of the idea of it that's constructing the outcome of it, you know, the technology and on the engineering side. But it's come a point in time where, people are out there creating things that have unexplainable effects based on the modern frameworks of physics, and physics doesn't care to really look into those things and validate them for what they are. Instead, they're just looking to approach it from a more ruling it out type of basis, you know, to look at something at face value that doesn't work as they generally figure, so then they look for ways to disprove it. And I think that's a little bit of a broken method.
Yeah, I think that the engineering side holds physics accountable for every bit of math that they do. So if you want to say there's something new in it mathematically, then in engineering it has to prove out that way. And you can't just put out something that doesn't make sense in engineering. Now, they always say theoretical, but what they really mean when they say that is this is the way it is. And here's the thing. I in no way want to say that physics is wrong in everything. As a matter of fact, they're pretty much right on. They have about 90% of it when you see when they put the right thing with the right experiment. It's that last 10% that I disagree with, because sometimes those are all the anomalies in the system that you have to account for that ruins your experiment, that the math doesn't account for because it can't. It's a variable that's an unknown. So you have to put it back together. I think it's wrong for us to always, rail on physicists on this show. I think that needs to change. And the whole thing I'm thinking is very simply, if they have something that defines it, that's great. Let's put the experiment to it. We're engineers. We build things. Let's put it to it, right? And then see where the broken parts are and fix it together. Like, for instance, you talk about ether theory, and when they wrote that paper, all they had was basic magnetics. They didn't look at anything else, but we know that magnetics has grown since then. So if you go back and reapply what we know now to what they knew then reevaluate the way it works, the ether theory makes a lot more sense, because now all the variables are accounted for.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying wholeheartedly on that. We reference widely accepted physics on the show all the time when trying to explain in a more layman's terms, how these sorts of phenomena work. I think that a lot of where the separation comes out is, first of all, in terminology. It's easy to get caught up in terminology and realize that whatever you're arguing about sometimes could just very well be two different, two ways to say the same exact thing. I think that where the science end of things is really fundamentally a little bit messed up, for what it's worth, and stuff we've touched on before too, is within academia, and just how it's really just know what's in the book and don't think outside what's in the book, more or less, from the academic perspectives and all the frameworks and how they're created. It's a big taboo to look outside those frameworks for things that but then they admit that there's all these gaps and don't look for ways to fill it. So what that ends up leading to, when that's the environment that you're learning, teaching, and experimenting in, and writing theses on, is it leads to a whole group of experts in a field who know a whole more than you and I ever will on probably the subject, right?
Mhm.
Except they're stuck asking the same wrong questions over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And it's them being stuck asking the same wrong questions that is the mechanism of this massive divide that's occurring. Because what happens when you have somebody who builds things and then gets certain outcomes and it's fairly objective, or maybe it's unobservable or undetectable in their realm of ability of testing. But if they were better funded, or if they had all the same resources that the science end of things had, that could easily bridge the gap. But the academic side of things is too busy shutting out all the engineering findings on a frequent basis, and often, if not always, it's on a theoretical only basis. So these scientists are seldom, if ever, going and actually observing the engineering, devices that are being developed and reported, and making observations for themselves. Instead, they're working off of scientific papers written about those engineering developments, and then not granting them, proper peer credentials.
Well, I think I want to say this. They try hard to build the experiment. And I've seen a lot of physicists do it. They go in there and they build the experiment and they isolate every little detail. And don't get me wrong, I think that's important when you get down to that part of it. I think the part that makes the engineer different is, though they do the isolation, they first just run it completely out of control. What things can you pull out of this? What's the max of this? What's the minimum of this? And it gives you all the variables you need, right? So if you know that you can't go over a certain limit, then you can set that in there. If you know you can't go below something, you set it. Now, there's sometimes anomalies that show up that completely change the experiment 100%, right? And those have to be accounted for in the experiment. You can't say, well, we have the whole experiment done and we isolate everything, and then somebody goes to build it and they didn't do one of the isolations that you did, and now it's completely backwards. That's where a lot of the debunking comes in physics, because when you're not ready for those questions that come up by people, then you'll never have the right answer. So you go, okay, well, we did have that, and here was what happened, and this is why we isolated it here. You know what I mean? Things like that. So then when it goes to the peer review and they build it and they go, okay, well, that works perfectly, right? Just the way you said, because of those things, and watch out for these. It's like I tell somebody, you can't garden by reading a book. If you
Right.
don't get out there and you get your green thumb, you know what I mean, and earn it, it's going to be so difficult. My son always told me, well, I'll just read the book, Dad, and I go out and do it. I go, okay, let's see how that works. You want to put it to a test? Here's my garden. Let's go out there, and you can read the book and tell me how it works. And you'll find it so much simpler just to, this is when you water. This is when you could tell the plant's, ready to, be taken from. This is when it would die if you did it. Things like that. So I think it's important to bounce back and forth between the two, because they're going to come up with a lot of crazy ideas. You're going to be forced to put those ideas into something that makes sense. And then there's going to be some variables that change. And trust me, there's going to be some sides on the engineering side where you just said, hey, I'm going to literally change your experiment by showing you this. So then you may have to rethink your direction you want to be in.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. But and it is without knocking them, and I'm certain that there's a greater purpose, but the direction that physics has really taken in the past 30 to 40 years has been mostly particle physics. And to me, that's just like somebody studying every single grain of sand in a sandbox to figure out why there's sand in the sandbox. And it becomes a little bit of a self-defeating thing, and because you can look at every speck of sand under a microscope, and every pore on the surface at 1,000 times magnification and so on. But what does that really tell you about how it all got there? I mean, can it? Sure, I suppose, but that seems like the worst possible way to go about having answers to questions that are much larger than the grain of sand, right? Sometimes you don't have to look to the finest point to get a full understanding of things, albeit that it doesn't hurt. But really just adding a little bit of credence to some of the results that have been shown throughout time, and having some kind of framework to at least explain these things. Totally aside from what you're doing on this channel or what anybody else in this group is doing, there's been 100 years of well-documented, people who have independently on their own, or with whatever knowledge they had of other people's work, come up with similar types of things that are still unexplained. And are we reasonably supposed to believe that all these people were just completely and utterly full of crap? Because I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, maybe a few. Don't get me wrong, but every single one of them, it's beyond coincidence.
Yeah. I honestly think that the day of me railing on physicists all day is over. I've had about enough of that. I think it's just time to be honest about what it is, man. We're building stuff in a garage, a lab, wherever you want to do it, and we engineer things, and that's our role. And
yeah.
I always say things are free on the channel, man, and it's like that's the honest truth, because there's going to be 50 ways to see an experiment, and that's why I encourage people to talk about it and leave them messages about it, as long as you have some constructive criticism. By all means, do it, because I take some of those things and run them in my next experiments. You know what I mean? Some of the times come out with the best results. So, yeah, I think that's about where it needs to go. I don't think that they're wrong all the time, the physicists at all. I genuinely think they have an idea. Now, they like to put electrons everywhere, and I'll tell you that's one of the biggest things between an engineer and a physicist. We don't see electrons. We see fields. And that's when you're building it, because that's the way things are building out. You know what I mean? You see the cogging. There's a field interaction, right? You're not seeing buildup of electrons on there as an engineer. You just don't. You see that the fields are having interaction. That's what comes out of it. And I think that's one of the things that I like to try to do. I'd like to incorporate electrons in there. I have a different view of them. And it's because of the way the field's built out. Every time they start talking about electrons in a project, they talk about hot energy. And as soon as I eliminate the hot energy, where are my electrons? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I just call them fields. And I am probably the worst person at saying things in a proper physics term ever. I'm describing an action of what something does. I am not telling you the physics term for it. Okay, it's not by
right.
Any
well,
stretch.
I mean, but the fields are made up of something, and it turns into the sand in the sandbox. It's how closely do you want to look?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
Right. It's how closely do you want to look? So when you take a look a little further back, right? I mean, anytime you have electrons or whatever in a condensed form coming from a point and spreading outward, that is a field, right? And we could sit there and dice it up all together. We had discussion the other day that came from the chat about, man, you guys have so many fields, right? Well, right, and that's the sandbox also, and that's where I want to bring this up. This is where a lot of the divergence comes from, is in the way that you describe something or the language, right? So, yeah, right. So there's two fields, right? A magnetic field, dielectric field. The fact is that when these fields come into interaction with each other, okay, there are different manifestations of energy, as we'll call it, right, that create in different bands of field interactions depending on the density, and the density and diffuse interaction, right? So those are the fields that we're talking about because that's what they basically are. I mean, I don't, but what if not field, then what the word, and that's where we kind of, struggle a little bit, is because at the root of it, it's true, there are two fields, right? But what happens when all of these other things form at these lines of interaction that are also field-like in their nature? What do you call it? So we can sit there and pick a word or dice it up all we want, but we're talking about the same thing. And I think that this is a big place where, physics and the observations and engineering, start to take a turn away from each other, is because you try to describe something and a physicist will say no. But again, this isn't knocking on physicists. This is just, again, a terminology dispute. Neither one is wrong.
Well, I think that closed-minded attitude of as soon as you show an experiment, they immediately have their answer and write you off. Nothing pisses me off faster than that, because it's like, you didn't look at it, you didn't see the interactions in it, and you immediately had your answer and you said no. And I'm sorry, it doesn't work for me. That is one thing I will never stop being pissed off about. It's that smug attitude.
Right.
I can't stand that. So it's like, come to the table, you want to do things, you want to look at it, you call it where the hell you want by the time we're done, as long as it works right when I build it. That's all I care about.
Yeah,
you know
pretty much. But what gets worse, though, is that when you share a finding, and because the finding is not necessarily in line with the finding of, a commonly attributed attribute of a certain other type of similar system, they'll, then that brings like the whole, well, that can't be. But what bothers me about that is like, okay, so let's use like Overunity as an example, right? Say Overunity, and I think that most physicists would turn around and say, well, Overunity is an impossibility. It violates, multiple laws of entropy, right? I think that that's sort of the general response to Overunity. But if you have the observation, then why isn't the question asked, okay, so let's not call it Overunity, right? You have a problem with the word, the terminology of it. Here's what the system is, and here's what the system's doing. It's obviously not coming from nowhere, it's coming from somewhere, right? So where is that somewhere? Can we look at that?
Well,
instead that question's not asked.
But it's a contradiction in itself, Joe. Energy cannot be either created or destroyed. Okay. So maybe the energy didn't come from the system that you started.
Without a doubt. We're surrounded by energy. Isn't the whole point of every discussion we have?
Yeah, I mean, that's the basic, simple answer, right? Okay, I agree with you. In that primary driving circuit, it cannot be created or destroyed. It can be lost because of heat. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Agreed. You won't see me saying no. The only problem is you didn't account for all the energy. So because you didn't account for all the energy, you don't have the right answer, because I've seen it a billion times, man. The law of this, the law of this, the law of this. You go, Lenz's law. Well, we break Lenz's law. Oh, how about the law of thermodynamics? Well, I'm breaking that law in the way that you see it, but not in the way it's written. You know what I mean? That's
in the traditional sense. We can say it like that. In the traditional sense of thinking, it seems broken. However, based on how it's written and how it's being applied, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you took a system and you trapped the energy in that system and it's not being recycled through the system, it's just being added in one spot, well, it looks like it's breaking Overunity, right? But is it? That's a kind of a weird question, right? If you're accumulating energy in one spot and it keeps accumulating, as soon as I tap that spot, I'm looking like I have a huge amount of energy, right? But in essence, all I did was the primary driver was to continuing to run, and it was still filling up the bucket, right? I just never emptied the bucket. So it could look like it's over unity, but when you write it in physics terms, it wouldn't be over unity at all. So
Right.
sometimes that happens, and you got to account for it and just call it what it is. You know what I mean? I'm trapping something somewhere, so therefore I didn't gain anything more. I just didn't lose anything.
Well, right. So I mean, what's interesting is if you think about like the surface of water for a moment, right? And you have like these little ripples on the surface, very little ripples, okay? But they keep on coming. They're constant, right? Well, if those ripples were to hit a wall, and instead of just being refracted or reflected back, right? If they were just to build up because they're caught, right? Eventually that particular little ripple would be a massive tsunami. And once you let that tsunami go, it's a tsunami.
Mhm.
But the ripple wasn't useful in itself, but the tsunami certainly is powerful and could do a lot. So that's sort of one of those things that like it really, I mean, that isn't that just another way yet again of saying what we say all the time about creating the fields that are in an expanding and contracting state where it holds everything in, because that's what that's basically saying. It's saying that we're not allowing it to reflect or refract out, right? We're keeping it in, right?
Yeah.
And that's just kind of one way to look at it, I suppose. And how do you prevent it from reflecting and refracting out? Well, you hold it in with the fields, but you also put it into a flow. So when you redirect it into a flow that is cyclical into itself, which is what a vortex is, right? Which is the same motions that we're looking for. Then at that point, you have a huge well.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the whole idea behind 0 point, is that you have to take into account everything in the room. That's it. Anything outside, anything in the space, anything everywhere else, that's literally what it is. It's not running a system and then producing more energy in that system, because your primary system won't do it. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and fool myself and say that it will. You have to create some other way of pulling the energy in. You got a spark gap. You're pulling more energy in, right? You're basically causing a percussion wave in order to get more energy to suck into it like a vacuum, right? That's basically what you're doing.
Okay.
And so that might do it, because then you're involving the environment into your project. So I think those simple things will fix it. But if you're running an experiment and you're just trying to get it by, say, one coil over the next coil over the next coil, well, that's not going to do it. But if I told you that we made them resonant to one another, now I could pick up energy, because I know resonance is its own form of energy when done right? So two things resonating together is a form of energy. Well, according to the law of thermodynamics, I'm still in there. I'm still good inside that framework, because, again, I'm pulling the energy from the environment in order to make those two things ring back and forth together. You know what I mean? So we're not that far off. I guess it's mostly just getting it back to, hey, these are the things that are actually going on versus the things that aren't. And I think a lot of people just throw off a term like free energy. Well, it's not free. I mean, it's just not. The world had to work for us to get the energy. Now, doesn't mean I have to pay for that world to work. It works on its own. I just had to realize that and pull the energy in that it was giving me. I mean, that's it. We got a big engine inside the earth. There's no reason I can't use it.
Right. And every normal and conventional way of energy production that we have utilizes our environment in one way, shape, or form. Right? Like, I mean, there's no other way. So, an engine uses internal combustion and fossil fuels or hydrogen, right? Even in the solar is just using the radiation from the sun that makes it through our atmosphere. And hydroelectric just is utilizing the natural flow of water to make a mechanical force to turn it to electricity. All these things are environmental factors that we harness and utilize. So when we have an endless supply of environmental factors around us, it's not coming from nothing. Just a matter of drawing it in, making it usable.
Oh yeah. I really think that we should all look at it kind of in the framework that we have so much more energy on this planet than we ever do use. And if you just stop and realize that some of the laws that you came up with need to be fixed to include that, right? That's as simple as that. Hey, there's more energy out there in this particular system. This is the way it runs. Agreed. If you're adding things from the environment, the amount of energy increases. It wasn't created. It was just drawn in by the system. That's it. That's a simple fix. When you say, I want to do 0-point energy theory or 0-point theory or the ether theory. So say you want to do the ether theory, right? You go, okay, well, you got Maxwell's equations, which basically is your equations for understanding magnetism. That's it. That's all that it is. Now you go, okay, well, he only dealt with traditional magnetism. So if that's the way it is, okay, it'd be fine. But we've already found that that's not it. Out of magnetism, you can get radiation. And it has to deal with field interactions or how they're actually manipulated. So now you have to deal with that in your system, right? So he didn't deal with that. So when you're writing your thesis on, hey, we got to talk about the ether, well, all that goes into the ether. We have radiation all around us. I don't know if we realize that or not. The wave that comes from the sun hits the actual atmosphere. And that interaction right there is what creates the heat on the planet in that direction. And then, because when the sun's down or we're turned away from the sun, we're not getting that same interaction. You see, that's it. It doesn't, not necessarily that it has to filter through it. All it has to do is push on the bubble. If it pushes on the bubble that's in our atmosphere, that's enough to create the energy that comes through and hits us. And it could just be that the energy that the bubble is creating itself is what's pushing onto us. So it is literally radiation that's coming down and pushing on us. We have to wear skincare products in order to stop that radiation. I mean, it's that simple. We know it's there. We know it's a part of the process in order to create everything that you wanted to build everything in the earth. You know what I mean? You can't build something without it. That's why I keep telling people it's not, cold energy, negative energy that we built out of that Tesla coil. You're literally building radiation. I mean, we do realize that the radiant field is radiation. If I'm telling you it does X-rays on the cold side and it does X-rays on the hot side, I'm literally telling you that it's radiation that we're dealing with. And at some point, everything has to be isolated, just like physics says, in order for you not to get nailed with all that.
Right. And just like radiation in general, it's only really manifest in its hot form, so to speak, on interaction with matter. Right. Like radiation just propagating through, space and energy, like whatever have you, just doesn't have the same manifest effects that it has when it's in, a relationship with matter. That's kind of what it boils down to. That comes down right back to, a spark gap, and turning cold energy to hot energy, right? It's the same sort of thing. It's not until it leaves the point of propagation and comes into an environment of mass saturation that there becomes an interactive process. In that case, it's sparking over one to the other because that's what the density levels prescribe.
I mean, the whole key to every one of these things is saturation, isn't it? I mean, literally, let's stop fooling ourselves here. All we're doing is saturating everything. It doesn't matter which experiment you looked at. It was literally saturating everything. That's what he did. It's how much can you pull out of the saturation? That's it. Can you saturate it?
Then the
And how much
second
can you
question
pull out?
becomes, and how much can you hold in?
Yeah, there you go. That's as simple as it gets. Those are the basic terms. If you're thinking in one of these experiments, that's it. That's all you have to do. You're working within that framework the whole time. Is I'm going to saturate this coil, and then how much energy can I pull out of it while keeping it saturated? That's it.
I mean, this could well just be my ignorance, but I've never heard physics terms put to these concepts just generally about the field saturation and effects. I just haven't, there's never really been anything that I've come across in my own reading that has defined this properly. And I think that, again, we're talking about there being a rift between engineering and the discussion that we're having right now, and where kind of science is leaving off, and there being a gap in between the two. And that's one good reason there, right? Where is it defined?
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. I was reading the chat again. Going in the wrong direction. Had to fix it. Sorry.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, I how do I say this? I generally think that we have it wrong on both sides, and between the physicists and the engineers, and I think that's just the way it is. And in the end, if we can get it straightened out a little better, I mean, just think about it. If you had a few more engineers that came in and worked on the problem with the physicists, then they get smarter, we get smarter. I mean, something comes out of it. That's kind of where it needs to go. I'll be honest with you, Joe, in the experiment that I'm going to run, there's no way I'm going to figure it all out without a physicist sitting there and, going through all the finer details of it. It doesn't matter how many times I write something down or what the experiment was, or what the reactions were. They're still going to have to put it to some kind of known phenomena, right? They're still going to have to say, okay, it's this, but there's this caveat to it, right? It's still going to have to happen that way, and I know that, okay? And I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, when I tell you I do this stuff for free, I'm literally doing it for free, okay? I'm building it. I'm having fun building it. My joy is building it and having fun with it. Then when I'm done, you could literally take the thing away and I'd still be a happy camper, okay? Because now it's going for something useful. And maybe if it just simply helps the air outside, or if it helps the water outside, anything like that, I'm a happy guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a good way to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should always do things because, you feel fulfilled in them. And not for any other reason primarily. It's you tend to be a lucky person when you're doing something that gives you fulfillment and you're also benefiting off of it. That's just wonderful. But like the reality is not that for most people. Like, in fact, the same minds that are capable of creating, coming up with these ideas and then creating all these things are often the worst at being able to make them fully realized. And I think that that's where a lot of hate about the community comes about too, right? It's sort of like, well, oh look, this person made a buck of it or something, or oh look, I thought of that 20 years ago, but here they are doing it, but what'd you do with it? And it takes not only coming up with the idea, but it takes also pursuing it and seeing it through. So it's tough. And all it would really take is for there to be a proper open-minded physicist out there to also have a good friend who they trust, who can show them things that it's not immediately. It's like, even if it's just they have to bypass everything that they know to a degree and say, hey, listen, I obviously believe you. I know what you're saying. Don't think there's trickery going on here. Let's get to the bottom of this. Like, that level of respect and trust is all it really takes. But I think that there's a sediment that continuously exists where science end of things wants to call everybody that's that doesn't hold their credentials as pseudoscientist on the theory end, then also wants to throw over to the engineering side and say, well, that's just not possible, so we're not even going to bother with it. So they don't give the time of day. And then what does that do is it grows resentment on the side of the philosophy and the theorists and the engineers to sit there and look at academia and be like, you're not paying us any time of day, and you don't know what the hell you're talking about. All you have is holes in your framework, and we're filling the holes, but you refuse to even give us any credit because you didn't find it.
Yeah, well,
So,
Joe, I literally sat there and listened to somebody who has a degree in physics and it wants to be a gatekeeper. But as soon as somebody comes in with their project, within 5 things in a Wikipedia page, they shoot them down, right? And it's like, okay, you don't deserve to be a gatekeeper. You are the worst person to be a gatekeeper. Matter of fact, the opposite of you is what we want. You know what I mean? We want somebody who's going to look through it and find everything that he was looking at in his experiment and then try to apply the physics to it. Not, hey, this is the physics rule, you're done, you're out of here, right? That's the worst person to be at the gatekeeper spot. You know what I mean? And do you really need a gatekeeper? Your whole goal, if you say free energy and you say gatekeeping, you are in a big contradiction and a failure right there. Stop, Go look in the mirror and tell yourself, this isn't right. I am a contradiction to myself. You cannot say.
I agree with you. Yeah. That's total hypocrisy. And to sit there and be an outspoken, and then don't, I think everybody's smart enough to know who that person is. Regardless, and it's no matter whether I consume their material or not, or enjoy their content or not, or anything. But yeah, gatekeeping, especially coming from an area of expertise, is the sign of somebody who's extraordinarily poor and stagnated in what they do. Okay? Because if you think you go and you've learned and achieved, and that's now your domain, right? So what does that mean, your domain? It means that everything is underneath you, right? So therefore, you get to pick and choose what the right and wrong is because, I went through and achieved this. What about everything that's above you? You'll ignore that because you believe that you have domain, right? So everything that's above you is ignored because you believe you have domain over it. And if it's not something that you already know or makes sense with what you already know, then all of a sudden, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, you're kept out, right? And that's gatekeeping is awful for anybody who wants to and aspires to be at the cutting edge of anything. Because the cutting edge, maybe it was discovered thousands of years ago, maybe it wasn't. There's not things that have not yet to be discovered, right? There's always new. What box do you want to put yourself in? And why sit there and be a representative of a community that you're trying to endorse while simultaneously trying to shove people out that are trying to to participate? Well, not everybody needs to have a voice on the subject, right? You could work in a lab somewhere.
What they should do is bring in the experiment, have the conversation with the person, use your physics knowledge to better the experiment or better the person, or just realign the situation that the guy's building things in. So if you say, okay, this follows this physics principle, so let's dive into it. Well, then he can come back to you as the builder and say, well, this, and this happened, right? So now you go, okay, well, so you're crossing this physics principle with this physics principle in order to get this result, right? See, now that's a constructive way to do it. But what you often get is shut down after one physics principle and not get to the second or third one. You see, the gatekeeper has to have an open mind on everything that happens. It has to be like, show me your side, you know what I mean? What's going on here? And then if you're a physics person, you should have an engineer with you who can help you evaluate some of this stuff. You know what I mean? that's kind of the point. You know, it can't just be one person. And I think they need to fix that. I don't like, you know, that whole one answer and you're done. So, or, hey, I read a bunch of books and I have all the answers, but you don't know what voltage and amps are and how to work them. You know what I mean? Or when they say AC, is it really AC or is it just a sine wave? Is it, you know, really this? Or is it really that? When you put, you know, DC flyback out and you say, well, it's that way because I put diodes on it. Well, are you sure you didn't miss the capacitance in there in order to get your energy to build up? I mean, there's a lot of things that an engineer could tell you where they just say, hey, it's this, this, and this. Or, hey, I'm going to take 2 plates of aluminum together and I'm going to put high voltage to them and I'm going to do the Casimir effect. Well, did you know if I simply isolated those plates where they can't spark over, I'm creating a laser? I mean, did you know that? Because you're giving the wrong examples or the right examples, but not the full truth to it, right? And then you're like, that's what I mean. There should be somebody else there who's built this stuff and says, okay, hold on. And then I'll be honest with you. There's things, if I was a physicist, I would just leave out of a paper. If it created a result that was detrimental to society in any way, you would never find it in that paper. I'll tell you that right now. I wouldn't put it in there. It's just the worst way to do things.
Well, I mean, there's certain parts of experimentation where your better judgment has to rule. You know, not everything that you find needs to be necessarily publicized. You know, and you got to weigh out the good with the bad because there's good and the bad with everything. So sometimes it's like you want to come out with something, but you know that it could be used the wrong way, and then you have to really kind of gauge, you know, what you're going to put out there. I think a lot of the things that we talk about on a regular basis have a high potential of being used the wrong way, and not necessarily in the I've achieved it, here it is way either. You know, like doing this sort of, you know, this type of experimentation isn't for everybody, and there's inherent dangers just along with that. You know, so there's inherent risk with trying to follow anybody's work if you don't know what you're doing, and unfortunately the learning curve could be kind of steep on a lot of these things, especially when you're playing with high voltage or different resonances that you have no real knowledge of. You know, you could be even just messing with resonance. You know, you could be creating an environment that's detrimental to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, like you really need to kind of weigh out not only what you put out there, but what sort of warning comes along with it from time to time, and use your best judgment. But it becomes difficult because, you know, if you're doing chemistry, you know, you mix a little too much of this one thing, or a drop of water finds its way into it. Next thing you know, the beaker blows up and you light your house on fire, right? And this is no different than that. You know, so you kind of got to use your best judgment.
My favorite one was when they put the liquid together and that big foamy stuff comes out. You know what I mean? That's like one of my favorite experiments that they do. I thought it was so cool. Sorry, I just had to say that.
No, trust me, that was a good one.
I saw the one the other day. I was watching a guy, and I guess he's doing physics too, but his channel's identified as a math channel. Maybe I haven't figured out the correlation yet, except for that physics is all about math. But he did a cool experiment, and he had the candle in there, and there was a little balloon or something. As soon as the candle wick went out, the little balloon came up, sucked up in the water, because it created a vacuum inside the chamber by eliminating the oxygen in there. So I thought it was an outstanding experiment.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, there was the one I just watched. I sent you it today, Joe. The guy basically took two coils that are resonant to one another, and then he put a capacitor and a light bulb on the secondary one and literally turned them on with no power connected to the second coil, which I thought was cool because it's kind of like what I do, right? But he shows you it's achievable in that very way. Just put the capacitor between them. So that I thought was interesting as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes total sense why that would work. But you know, it's great that there's people out there doing it too, and I think that that's important for people to see, because I know sometimes it sounds like we just like to over talk about stuff, and things, but and I think that's why we've discussed at length, opening the channel up in a more accessible way for people that are in here doing their own stuff to kind of come on and share too. Because I think that it's important to keep on expanding in that direction where, they see something here, then they realize, hey, look, this is what I could do with that. And then, it brings it to that next level. And, hopefully it will get to the point where it, not that it's not there, but that it absolutely warrants, the attention of somebody to come in and bridge the gap between the engineers and the scientists.
Wow. I'm just going to address this real quick. And I'm sorry, Joe, but I have to read the chat as I do this, right?
Yeah, no worries.
And the chat's going completely off the rails. Look, I'm okay with the discussion on things. We're trying to have a positive discussion here. And to be honest with you, someone that just comes in the chat to disrupt or saying he disagrees with everything in the world, just not going to be tolerated. It's okay to disagree with what we're saying. But if you're literally saying that we're donkeys and stuff like that, dude, you're out. I'm done. You know what I mean? After the show, I'll go ahead and turn it back on, let it back in the next time. And we'll see if that kind of a, situation changes. But honestly, man, I'm just not going to deal with it. Not anymore. We're over that, bro. And, that's just the way I see it. So, yeah, that's it. All right, Joe, let's keep talking about what we're talking about. I'm sorry I just had to do it, man, because I was.
Yeah, no problem. Here, this one's for Nathan. He was really nice about it. Fuck you, cunt. I don't care. I don't take anything personally. I'm just saying, we could be that way. Like, we could be that way, but why make it? And I'm not paying it any more mind. Like, let people say whatever they're going to say. I'm really happy that we have the group that we have. I'm very happy about that. And, it's. I think that one thing that I'm most interested in, this is where science and engineering is not going to bridge the gap, unfortunately, is like the realm of of consciousness being in existence in this, right? Because you realistically have science who's trying to look outside of that realm, the spiritual aspects of it all. And then you have engineers trying to bridge the gap with the technological aspects of it all. But there's that trifecta and that third part that if it's missing, you lose, and frankly, if you're in there saying things in the chat that are like nasty about us, you don't get that third part either. And this probably isn't yours to behold regardless. Like, you really have to be, in personal tune in order for these things to start to make sense. It's not that the technology works or doesn't work based on your belief or something like that, but what it means is that you'll never be able to get to the point of achieving more than somebody else who does have that faith and understand. So, like, these are all like self-within principles that it's important that you dial into, because it works exactly the same as everything that we're discussing. And our own physical, presence and everything like that also has a spiritual essence to it as well that connects with the greater whole of it. So, you're either there or you're not.
Well, one of the things too is frequency around us affects our mental state. And I think we all need to start realizing that. And so it drives some people absolutely insane, or it can really calm an individual. And this has been known for a very long time throughout history, that we're starting to get into the aspect of it, of playing with things that'll actually get into that. You know what I mean? They say put the headphones on, and then they got these machines that basically put out a radiant field between the two. I mean, they got all kinds of cool stuff that deals with this stuff. But if you're not open-minded, you can't get into that. You know what I mean?
No, you can't. In fact, it'll destroy you. To be real.
Oh, it will.
It mark my words, will destroy you. And that's not a joke. Yeah, forced resonance, forced induction, into certain states. That's what it is.
Mhm.
From the technology bridging the gap to the conscious and the spiritual aspect of it, right? But yeah, if you're not open to it, and if you're not able to be balanced, you will be destroyed. Trust me. Like in all sorts of ways that I can't describe to you. Like, just trust my words, or see for yourself, one or the other, right?
Well, you're getting into like start seeing some time dilation, and you're going to start to see some funny things appear when you start dilating time a little bit. And if your mind is 100% into it, man, it's going to be very, very hard to cope with it. And
Oh
there's
yeah.
going to be a lot of people who can't. And they always talk about they want to create something. Well, every time you create something, something else happens, right? And you have to be able to mentally put up with it. And that's kind of the thing here. You know what I mean? Some of these things, fields that you create, or however you want to say it, they have a real negative impact sometimes. And as soon as your body's dialed into it and your mind's right and everything else, you'll know exactly when to turn it off because it's wrong. You know exactly when to leave it on because it's right. And you don't have to even see the numbers on it. You just know immediately. You know what I mean? Your brain tells you right away, boom, this is wrong. We got to go. I'm done. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. If anybody knows what you mean, it's me. Absolutely. Yeah. No, and strange stuff does happen. You got to remember, like playing with high voltage, creating fields, creating time dilation, as a byproduct of some of the fields that are being created, having different higher levels of radiation. Another way to say all these different fields, like we generally say, is to understand that they're dimensional. Okay. So literally creating the separation and coherence of these fields in compressed states is more or less taking like upper dimensionality and bringing them into our realm, more or less. It's sort of what it's doing, because usually it's so diffuse and above us and works at such like a limited level that it doesn't really, those effects don't really necessarily come about. But when you start compressing them and then separating them, all of a sudden there's a word for that. It's called a portal. And that's in the spiritual sense, right? You create a spiritual portal. And these devices and stuff, ultimately kind of work on that same exact concept, and therefore have the same similar type of result. And I know that it's something that's been pretty widely reported by anybody who works with high voltage, to any great extent. So, it's definitely something worth mentioning here too, that there's weird stuff that happens that you don't even need to have observable effects to really witness.
Sorry, Joe. Give me a second.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm still dealing with this. Anyway, yeah, I agree with you. So we get into the thing with Ralph Ring and stuff like that, and he was talking about the mental picture of driving the spaceship, right? When he's connected to Crystal, and it's funny because like I might lose my mind doing it, but I think Joe would fly the ship easily. You know what I mean? We're just tuned into different things. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, well, some of that shit does get weird though.
I think to you it's all bugs on the windshield. You're just like, whatever, we're going this way.
Yeah, there's certain there's certain elements of it that I've definitely kind of like desensitized to over time. But yeah, I mean the long-term meditation and everything like that is definitely kind of opened up sort of like an ever, you kind of have to close that bound off. Like, and if you don't, if you bring it back into your conscious waking states and stuff, it can get really weird. It can, but like, I'm sane. So like I'm able to like, know know the difference of like what's going on in meditative effects and stuff, and be able to like balance it into my life where it's like a non-issue, but like I could understand how somebody who's not like understanding or ready of those sorts of things would definitely have a hard time with that, I would suppose, because it's not like it's not like hallucination or something like that, or like being a schizo or something like, but like there's definitely like sensory like awareness of things that are just beyond the scope of a normal normal resonant state.
Well,
Yeah.
let's just say it this way. So when you start creating time dilation, and this is what I'll say about it, because I don't want to go too far into it. You start to get like shadows that start to appear, and you just have to remember this: your eyes are not picking up the light right because the light's being bended, so you're getting partial things that move quickly around the room or doing something else, and you're not realizing what's going on, and it's the field itself creating it. And it's your eyes' perception of the actual light in the room. And if you're not mentally prepared for that, it could be really jarring to somebody. And it could really like make you feel like you belong in a nut house. It's that bad. And it doesn't go away right away because your mind puts it in a pattern in your brain, and then you rethink about it and things like that. Then you start tripping out with your eyes. You know what I mean? So,
well, not only that, but when you're inside of that time dilation field and you fall into resonance with that time dilation field, you turn off the power to that. And over time, the diffuse of the fields in the room collapse. But everything that is resonating actually collapses at a slower rate, right? So your mind actually is still working on that wavelength for a significant some time after it's just kind of turned off and dissipated. It's no different than having ice cubes in a glass, right? It's all water in the glass, but some's frozen, some's not. If you dump out the water in the cup, the ice is still there, right? It takes a while to melt back down to more water. And that's sort of the situation at hand with it.
Yeah. I tripped out, to be honest with you, the first time it happened, Joe. I wasn't expecting it.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Like, I went around for the next week, like going, oh my God, dude, something's wrong here. Like, I need to see a doctor. And it's when I started up the experiments again, I go, oh man, it's me. I'm doing something here that's creating this. And that was a real trip, that when it starts happening and you're going, oh, because how do I say it? It's like a little dark shadows running around the room with you, and you're like, that shouldn't happen. Like, I'm mentally sane, you know what I mean? But I'm seeing these things, and it's like out of the corner of your eye. It's it's not somebody walking up to you going, hey, I'm here. It's not like that. It's
no.
Boom, right by you, and you're like, what?
But okay, so like I know I'm sensitive to like like sleep paralysis type states and stuff like that. I've been susceptible to that for years. Probably closer to a decade than anything. And that's proof in the pudding that your mind, has this ability to superimpose like time dilation dream states on top of actual sensory observation. And some of it could be sensory observation as well, because of what you said about the bending of the light due to the time dilation as well. But at what point does that have to happen? Does that have to happen environmentally, or can that just happen as a function also of your eye and your retina being in a state of time dilation as well? Because as long as it happens before it hits your optical nerves and stuff like that, then you're still going to have the phenomena occurring, right? So it's super fascinating. What's interesting is that type of phenomena exists increasingly and in a more defined manner. The deeper into those types of time dilation or dream states or meditative states that you get. So the deeper you go in, the more defined they become. And in a case like sleep paralysis, where you're in full blown, dreaming sleep mode, like those types of things could appear like apparitions and such. And trust me when I tell you, like, it's it appears as real as, as the hand in front of you. It just does. So it gets a little crazy in that sense. And frankly, it used to scare the living shit out of me. Like living shit. Like, was like convinced like a demon was trying to like suck my soul out and stuff a couple of times. And I'm dead serious about that, man. It's scary. But then like I learned not to be afraid of it. And then I learned to control it. And now, like, I can't say that I look forward to that happening, and it doesn't happen as much now as it did because I've kind of tapered off on my meditation and stuff a little bit, right? But like not stopped, but I kind of like slowed down a little bit. And it doesn't happen as much. So I don't like look forward to it necessarily, but I can't say that I don't at the same time because I've learned how to exploit it. And some of the experiences that I've had in exploiting it are so fascinating and just like, profound ways that like would bend the mind. And it's all because of meditation. And it's, people will tell you this, like you get these sorts of effects when you're able to achieve the higher mind states.
So check this out. I'm going to answer this question here, Joe.
Yeah.
Right here. What's the story behind that? So check this out. I was running tests on my gravity flyer, and this is a while back, like a long while back. And I'm trying to figure out the fields in this. And this is why I say you got to run things to the max all the time. I had this thing pushing out as much static electricity as humanly possible for what things I had. It was literally running at like 40 volts on the input and putting between two DC flybacks and then going out. So the amps were really low and the voltage were super high, right? This thing was sparking over like crazy at a beat rhythm, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then I had turned on my Tesla coil, and here comes that field belting out, man. Center of the Tesla coil, it's a radiation field that's coming out now, right? All three are interacting. You got to remember when that thing sparks over, because those discs aren't always flat, they wobble. So they're on, off, just like a beat rate, right? So it's taking this bubble and it's going like this to it, right? Well, the energy in the whole entire thing picked up. Like it doubled in seconds. Like it was just like boom. And then it's doubled in energy right there. It's just like a whole wave comes through the room. And it's not, you could see it, you could feel it go right through you. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like boom, and you're like, oh God, what did I just do? You know what I mean? And
you just got dosed with a lethal amount of radiation.
Yeah, that's basically what it was. So I'm literally building inside of a field right there. Is what started to happen is I'm standing there, man. I'm standing next to this thing that's building it. And I don't want to be on the outside of it because then the other effects hit. I'm still stuck in the center with a massive amount of static electricity around me, right? It's like literally you can feel it on your clothes, your hair, everything, right? So yeah, when you start doing that, then your eyes start tripping because it's changing the light in the room. Like as you look, you're not looking at everything the right way. There's shadows that pop up. There's things that are moving. There's looks like little electron lights are flying all over the room and buzzing around like flies. And you're going, oh man, this is the strangest experience I've ever had. And again, we're not talking, millions of volts here. Like I said, I only input 40 volts on that static electricity. The Tesla coil was only inputting 40 volts as well. It's the way the field's interacting along with that spark that started to create the field that was going on. That's when it started to mess with your eyeballs and light. So that's kind of the story behind it. That same field, by the way, turns off and on my computer. It'll turn on different web pages on my computer, and it'll start changing that as well. If I could find a way like Joe does to communicate inside that with some kind of, understanding of it, I'm sure we could do a lot more inside that field, but
Probably.
I didn't have that.
That's a good point. I mean, I've only experienced what I just shared, as far as like achieving that sort of thing. But seeing as you're drawing a parallel to and it's definitely related, right? The advice that I could kind of give on that is that you have to be still and you have to accept it. You have to accept it, and rather than, because the thing is that like your like nervous system, and I was going to say your brain, but realistically your nervous system, okay, is the prison of your signals, okay? You're more or less, it's just whatever's flowing through it and whatever radiates directly off of it, off of your body, right? But it's a prison for your resonance, okay? It will stop any attempt of having the resonance exit. It will. Like, so you actually have natural reflexes and so on and so forth, like shock, like being shocked, like super surprised and just being startled out of something. Like if you've ever been falling asleep before and like you're just about to fall asleep, but then you snap out of it real quick and it's like terrifying almost. That's actually the same exact type of sensation. Now, if you can feel yourself falling into it and you can consciously accept it to happen and let it happen, because you consciously allowed it and you bypassed it, then at that point, if you embrace it and then just view what there is to be viewed, so to speak, now you've reached that next layer. So where it was, the effects of what it was having on you could, you could ultimately exploit it that way, but you have to be able to realize it's coming on, catch it ahead of time, prepare yourself, then zero yourself, and then just like fishing, when the fish bites and it bites, that's when you set the hook. If you do it too soon, you're just going to snap out of it. If you do it too late, well, he already took the bait, it's gone, right? You already jumped out of it, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of it. What that'll lead is to your ability to kind of have a more honest view of what it is you were seeing in the first place.
Well, my whole thing was with it is, if I can correct my frequency in my brain to get it to interact a little bit with what's going on, I think it's probably not out of the realm of possibilities that you could change the web pages to the ones that you want, because it's already communicating with your computer by saturating the MOSFETs or transistors in it, right? So now it's just the pulse, the beats, everything like that. It would all have to align properly. Like, you'd have to get your mental state to match it. And well, that's the way I see it anyway. It could very well be putting on a set of headphones that's listening to the device itself that puts you in rhythm with it, that allows you to do it. I mean, I don't know. It's something to look into as a possibility. It's kind of in the woo, but then again, when you start seeing things in the room like that, all of it's kind of in the woo.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like it's in the woo, but it's only because we generally talk about the science and engineering aspects of it, which is exactly how we ended up into this conversation. Mm-hmm. Sounds like woo, because we only generally talk about the science and engineering, right? And science and engineering has no interest, generally speaking, in conventional terms, right, of looking into the phenomena that we just discussed, okay? The fact is that there's whole other realms of things, whether it be religious or spiritual or psychology driven, or any one of these various sub studies of consciousness and being, right, that directly overlap with the other two, directly analogous, relevant, and connected, and we shun that out, right? So we're talking about a division between engineers and scientists, but at the same time, there's this whole other aspect that's not only a rift, it's just excommunicated. excommunicated out of the conversation entirely. And here we are drawing the parallels and then showing how they overlap. So if anybody wants the big picture, you have to again zoom out of the sandbox. You're in the sandbox. You're playing with another grain of sand. You look out, you're like, wait a second, what holds us in here? It's a border of wood. What's around it? All grass. The further you zoom out, the better the picture you get. And that's sort of what it is, figuratively and literally. Because that's what that allows you to do, is once you have the time dilation situation, the borderline phenomena is occurring, and then you accept that phenomena, and now you've entered this level. If you've raised your level within that, all of a sudden you find you're here and there, here and there and whatever, and then and now, right? That's how that kind of works. You kind of realize that space and time start to layer up on top of each other, and the communication there is not the same as communication here, and that's where it really ties in with old school alchemy and stuff like that, is because the geometry and symbolism is the language of the universe.
Oh, it is.
So now you got to bring in all the historical stuff into it as well, and all the texts and where everything came from. You want a real origin story. What part of your origin do you want to know about? Because the symbols didn't come from nowhere either, right? Is that the part you want to know about, or do you want to know about when you were pooped out the center of the torus? Whatever part you want to talk about. But the fact is that it's all related, and it happens to all pretty much be the same.
You imagine that you get in some kind of UFO scenario and you're not ready for that? I mean, you're literally talking about time dilation fields in order to create the UFO, in order to take it out of its time as it sits there so it can move at enormously fast speeds. But to it, it's not. To you, it is. So it is literally that phenomenon which you have to come at peace with. If your craft isn't sealed up right, you're screwed. I mean, you're not mentally prepared for that. You're going straight to the loony bin. So,
yep. And this is what I'm saying. Like, you need to be able to have a steady sense of self, like, in order to, appreciate all of these sorts of things for exactly what they are, and then bring that into your life and yourself in a meaningful way and understand the difference. And, it's hard to say, because, like, I feel almost disingenuous saying, well, that's not real and this is real. Okay, that feels disingenuous, but that also kind of sounds crazy. That, right? Like, conventionally sounds a little crazy. At the same time, you have to understand that that is not physical reality, and the realm that we kind of play in and exist in is physical reality, right? So it doesn't matter no matter how real that is, the only thing that you're going to bring back from there is whatever you get from there that you can then bring into your life, right? There's the differentiation. This isn't like, it's magic at the same time, which is not magic at all. It's just having this higher sensory perception that allows you to, be able to grasp these things outside of yourself and then bring it into yourself. Like, it's interesting in that way. Again, is it any less real than reality? No. But at the same time, is it reality? Also, no. It sounds contradictory, but it's sort of not.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. Yeah, a lot of people in the chat had some of the kind of similar experiences going on in their situation, where if you're not ready for it, it really takes you back hard and really messes with your mental state. A lot of people, I don't think they really understand this. They believe in God, and because they do, they understand that they'll get through it, right? And that's kind of the thing. If you don't have any belief in that, it's kind of hard to understand you're going to get through it. You're just going to look at what's going on. And you're not going to be mentally prepared to move forward with it. You know what I mean? That's
when you reach certain points, right? And this could happen in various different ways. It doesn't only have to happen my way. Like there's been many people on this channel and that across all over that'll say this. There's certain times where like you're ready for some type of information or some type of sign or some sort of direction, and it just happens upon you, you know, and you sort of get like this download, right? You get like all of a sudden all these questions that you had, they're answered, right? There comes a point where you reach like such a high level of this stuff where like you end up having an exponential crisis. Like you do. Like that's even if you're together. Like because you're just like, oh man, this is too much to handle. Like, you know, you start understanding things at a plane that like it becomes too much for you to comprehend, and it contradicts so much of what you fundamentally held as truth, but you now know that that's just simply not the way it is, you know, and it's only at that point that you have to reconcile that. You know, you have to reconcile that and realize it's okay to be aware of these things and integrate this and have it benefit me in a good, positive way, whatever have you, right? But the types of stuff that often comes to people, and I'm not only talking about myself here, it's been shared widely, right? You know, Gerald has said it, this, you get all this information, you don't know what to do with it. Like you could literally lose your marbles, like plain simple. Like I'm talking committable, lose your marbles, commit suicide, you know, like all sorts of bad, like just lose your stuff because it's a crisis, you know, but you get, you know, you kind of balance it out, and then you're fair with it, and you know, you make it work. And if you're in a good place, you're going to make great with it. It's going to change your life entirely forever. There's no going back.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to, you know.
You kind of, yeah, you have to deal with it because it won't ever change for you after that.
Yeah.
It's kind of with you the whole time. It's like when I started to lose my hearing, right? I started hearing birds. Craziest thing, right? And it's not individual birds. It's just chirping sound. And I can't tell you why, and it probably has to do with something physically in my ear, but it just sounds like that all the time. So to me, it's just like a melody I live with. You know what I mean? I go around chirping birds, you know, having a good day, whatever. I'm sure another person would just drive me insane. So, and I don't know why that is. And at this point, I just don't care. It just is what it is, and I live with it.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of people that have a disability with one of their senses, you know, obviously they start to compensate with their other senses in other ways. But and you know, you report this more than I, you know, you make commentary on this because I'm making an assumption here. But like you kind of just alluded to, there's certain things that your mind's going to make up for you where that sense is never totally dead necessarily. Like it, and some people will chalk that up as phantom or something like that, where it's like phantom sounds or, you know, something to that degree. But at the end of the day, like your other sensories could still give the missing sense input in some kind of discernible manner, or maybe it's even functioning at a degree that, you know, your brain just isn't trained to really fully understand either, which is just a whole nother thing, because that part of your brain, yeah, it could be atrophied if you never dial in on it. But if you dial in on whatever that disability is too, and you keep that part active enough, you know, you could possibly have a sense that ultimately people are just incapable of having, generally speaking, under normal functioning.
Yeah. I guess it kind of if you're a roll with the punches kind of person, it's fairly easy. If you know what I mean? If you're not, it's kind of hard. And I kind of had to live with that myself. Yeah. It's every time something goes wrong, there's always something compensating for it or changing it. And that's one of the hardest things to deal with. Like, see, my ears are so sensitive when I have these things on. Like, they're all the way up. Like, if there was more volume to it, I would put it all the way up more. It's that bad. So when I'm doing my experiments, it's so funny. You guys tell me, oh, it's making sound. I go, can't hear damn sound. I have no idea that it made even sound to it. You know what I mean? And then you go, Dad, make all these kind of frequencies, and we all hear them. I go, so I'm subjecting myself to all these different frequencies and have no clue about it whatsoever, right? It was actually quite funny looking back on it.
But then you look at somebody like Beethoven, right, who couldn't hear in his life, but he made all this beautiful music because, you know, it's just something he could feel inside of him. You know, he heard it without it going through his ears and hearing it. Like, you know, it's that type of thing. And it seems unexplainable, and it seems like a paradox in a way, right? It's like, well, I mean, how are you going to sit there and be perfect at something that you're incapable of hearing? And that's just not necessarily the way it works all the time.
Yeah. So cool, man. Sorry, I'm putting up the chat at the same time, Joe.
Yeah, no, perfect.
Yeah. So anyway, so we'll move on from that. I wanted to put that out there for people and things like that. So yeah, we're kind of getting into a new realm of science here where it all starts to mesh. And it's going to get worse because the more things that they discover, they're starting to find this. And
Yep.
You know, you can look at certain experiments and you go, oh, you know, they've already found it. They just didn't tell you in what they did. And they don't want to talk about it because to them, that's way far in the woo. And as soon as they talk about it, they get discredited because of the community, the way it's set up. That's why it's probably better for someone like me to just tell you what it is, and then you can figure it out. And you'll know if somebody went through it or not. There's certain things that you see in there that other people just don't, and they can try to describe it, but they'll be lost. So
yeah, the whole thing about it is like being ready for it, because like what's interesting to think is like, even though it sounds all woo and stuff, if you were to go to these same experts that say it's woo, right? And then you sit there and you just start mentioning certain philosophers of, you know, that are widely taught in universities and so on. And just like if you start mentioning all them, you know, they'll give credence to their work and praise them for, you know, the excellent works that they've created. But what makes them excellent? What makes them excellent? The fact is that they're exposing all of this. But it's not for everybody to discover. Not everybody could extrapolate the meaning and then have the vision of themselves to understand what it all means in context, and then be able to say, hey, wait a second, breakthrough, you know, and then apply it and say, wow, I've now gotten out of this what the context was. It was more than just some wise words. Like, what made them all, what made the wise words wise? You know, not because it sounded good, because there's inherent truth to it. You know, and talk about, I mean, like Plato, like being probably the first one that comes to mind, I would say. You know, you talk about generalized writings of like Hermes Trismegistus, if you want to call him that, you know, or whoever wrote his philosophy under that name, you know, or Marcus Aurelius. You know, you look at all these old Stoics and stuff. They knew all this all along. You look at the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It all alludes to Christ. You know, Christ and Christ consciousness and transcendence, and, you know, not what to do and what not to do, but how to be. Right?
Yeah, they literally, and I'm just going to tell you that Sphinx is not supposed to be a head of a person on there. It is a lion. It has always been a lion. The lion is a symbol of God. It has literally been that way forever. They deal in meditation, consciousness, and frequency, all of it. It's written on every single temple. I mean, I don't know how people don't see it. It's all over that thing. Everything that you look at, they have tuning forks everywhere on there. They're literally telling you, hey, you tune something to a certain frequency and you'll be able to light these jewels up and stuff. And it's not that hard to put it together once you understand the science behind it. But man, how do we not see it there? How do we not know that they're doing this?
I mean, once you realize the whole thing is a huge resonance chamber, you could sit there and dice up all day long what you think it did or didn't do, what its purpose was. But the fact is that it's a resonance chamber. So no matter what it was for or wasn't for, that was its purpose, right? Was to sit there and hold in and amplify resonance. And you could insert your usage there. But at the end of the day, like, they knew that was significant enough to build such a monument, one that widely it's known and accepted that it would be challenging under today's circumstances with modern advancement and technology to recreate that. like challenging, if not at all impossible. Like, I mean, I guess nothing's impossible, but you know, you get what I'm saying. Like, this is not an easily achieved feat for any person.
Well, the thing is not only did you have to understand it, you had to master it to build it in that size. So the fact that some people think that they weren't as smart as us, guys, I'm sorry to tell you this, but they were like light years ahead of us. They're doing things back then that physics can't explain now. I mean, that's what's crazy about it. All of it, the engineering was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, true stupidity and ignorance lies in the fact that you think that technology is an LCD TV, you know, or an automobile. Like, those are ends to a means of a need of modern society. That's not intelligence. That's not advancement or real true technology. You know, like Nathan just said, the stuff that they were doing is yet to be fully realized and discovered. You know, and I think that that's barely evident. I think that used to be much more fringe than it is now. I think that the mystery of the pyramid and so on and so forth, you know, at first was a controversial, if not conspiratorial thing, but I don't even think it falls into that category anymore. I think that now it's one of several theories of what functionality they probably had. And all of them are right off the cuff, like, you know, of things that we understand now, like that we're not even there yet. All of them, and they're widely accepted, no matter which one you subscribe to.
Yeah, it kind of makes you think twice about some of the stuff they do in Greek culture too.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like who was that? The lady that would be out there and she speaks for a goddess and it goes into this tunnel chamber and it was some kind of thing where all the people would go by and see if it was in their fortune or not in order for their trip to come true. Or I can't remember the name, but it kind of just makes you wonder when you look at something like that, you go, was it really true? Like, was there something more going on in that cavern, in that area? You know what I mean? They always talk about the gas aspect of it. Like, there could have been gas going on in there and changing how your mind viewed things. But it also could have just been the frequency as well. If they're going into a zone with just a chamber of frequency, they're literally in a resonance chamber. You know what I mean? Who knows what outcome they're doing that? I mean, they even have in the Vatican, from what I understand, something that can view time. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, seriously, they didn't get that from our technology now. That was from a while back. I mean, they obviously knew something. There's a reason why everybody looks at every kind of ancient writing that it's on stone, because it's telling you a story. It's trying to tell you how they saw things and how they viewed things and how they built things and what the actual science behind it is. And some of it's just a simple key to unlock it. You go to Egypt, put a mirror in the middle of it. That's how you need to view it, because it's the reflection that you're getting. It's not You know what I mean? And that goes, you have to have a double-sided mirror so you can read the reflection on one side and the other. Then take it out of 2D, put it in 3D, and now you have the answer to what you're looking for. You see, it's not that hard to figure out.
Well, I mean, another good example of a shift in all this stuff was, more recently, I suppose, than that. Before, all the Protestant reformations of Christianity, right? You had Catholicism branch off into Catholicism and, Christian orthodoxy, right? And it's kind of like the East-West divide of Catholicism, right? Lesser so than any of the Protestant theologies that came thereafter. And, it was during that split that the church really kind of established itself and even representative in its architecture, right? As to what fundamentals they were going to hold, and where Catholicism went more with a dogmatic ritual type approach, while still maintaining some of the original attributes of no knowledge of stuff like we're talking about. The Christian Orthodoxy end of things was much more of a mystical Christianity, one that still kind of exploited a lot of the old architectures and resonant geometries that existed in their churches and so on. A lot of the old art styles that were more indicative of alchemist styles, and stained glass and so on and so forth, that was more representative of sacred geometry as opposed to idols and so on, right? So there's your differentiation right there. You had the Christian orthodoxy that was following this whole old school approach, right, of sacred geometry, resonance, vibration, reverberation, and all the sound acoustics of its buildings, and then the structure itself and everything like that. Whereas the Catholics left it more dogmatic and idol based. So that was sort of like a big split that occurred that's still visible today. If you go into a Greek or Russian, Orthodox style church, what you'll see exactly what I'm saying. It's more like the most grandest of Catholic cathedrals at a small church, whereas a small church here is just, talking about a countryside church is more akin to like a schoolhouse, with tall ceilings. It's just kind of the way it is.
I was thinking of the Oracle of Delphi.
The Oracle of Delphi, yeah.
That's what it was. Sorry.
Yeah, they were in a resonance chamber too, right? Weren't they? They were like up on a pedestal, like underground in a big hollow. You'd have to walk up to see them or whatever, and there was like nothing underneath them. So
they had a temple, and then behind them was the cavernous structure where they went into and did everything. Yeah.
And call it woo and myth and legend and this and that, and that's fair and great. But the cavernous structure. This is what you need to extrapolate out. This is the information.
Yeah. Once alchemists start to figure out that they need different frequencies in order to build certain things, I think it'll make a huge step in science. It's pretty easy when you start talking about your, the Russell scale and how things go in a vortex. But then did you associate that with your experiment when you started breaking down all the chemicals and stuff and all the minerals and materials? Did you take into account the frequencies that are going on into it? Or did you just put the power into it? You see, there's a way to look at this. Like when Joe and I talk about the crystals, we go, okay, so when they put it in there and it has energy in it, there must be a frequency to it. Well, that frequency is how you manipulate that whole thing. So now look at it in a different way. Say I'm trying to put gold back together. Well, I need the right frequency, don't I? If I don't have it, is it going to put back together correctly? And probably the answer is no. You'll probably get it off by one molecule or something like that because it wasn't aligned properly. It's like the structure that you're creating. So when you build a resonance coil, you're building the structure for it. Then it goes along and has different frequencies inside of it, but the structure's correct. So that's probably something that if they really, really were like a good alchemist, they would figure that out. And all the things, why do the scales look the same when you start looking at alchemy, or as you start looking at the Russell scale? Why is it in a vortex? Why did they keep some of the same symbolism between the two? Well, because they're directly related in a way, and all you got to do is attach your brain to why. And it's the frequency. Everything runs on frequency and resonance around here. We just are not awake to it yet.
Yeah, and when like you said, when you're building a coil structure that mimics the natural crystal structure of matter, not all is created equal, because not all crystal lattices are created equal, right? The ideal circumstance, if you want to envision something as an analog, would be to have one coil that's adjustable to do everything you needed to do wherever it is. It's adjustable, meaning it's capable of achieving all these different resonance states as needed, and in proportion to one another. And the analog for that is, if you think about like a TV display, you have all the pixels and you control each pixel. Each pixel melts together into something that from further away you see differently, right? And you could change each pixel and how it moves, and to create what appears to be an image, right, from further away. Now, if you are able to modulate frequency fields in flow patterns similar to that of a high definition display screen, for instance, in 3 dimensions as opposed to a 2-dimensional plane, now all of a sudden you have a solid state that achieves everything that we're discussing and can easily be immediately changed, to change the attributes on the fly as you need. And that's where the adjustment of everything could come into in a more, and again, this is looking like far down a pipe, but that's the analog, is like having the changing pixels on a screen. Perfectly, if you were able to visualize all the different frequency patterns and interferences that occur, everything that gets canceled out, everything that flows, and everything that amplifies, right? It would be like that pixel, and then what you see would be from further back rather than zoomed in. And I think that's the best way to kind of get your head around that.
So hold on. You say pixels, I automatically thought of light. And you always hear the term thrown around, light makes matter. Well, light directly does not make matter. It's not physically possible. But what if you
hold on.
Oh, let me finish.
It
and then
is
you can tell me.
physically possible, but yeah, continue.
Let me just put it out there. What you misunderstand is how light's created. And you have to have some sort of magnetic field. You have to have some kind of radiation field in order to even see the light. See, that's the thing. It's multiple layers to it. So light itself is not going to form into a little ball. You have to put it into some other type of field that's going to structure it. So when you put it in the radiant field, when you put it in the magnetic field, now it starts to structure. It has to accumulate volume inside of it. You see, it's, I'm sorry, you put light through it, it's like a lens. It's going to spread out everywhere, right? But that's not what we're looking for. We're looking to create matter. So now I need it to coalesce. The only way to make it coalesce is to put it in a field that's available for it to coalesce in. So when you look at it, you go, okay, well, that's a radiant field. So then that's going to have this effect on it, and I can get this type of matter. I could turn around and put it through a magnetic field. It's going to create a different type of matter. I could put it through both, and it'll come out with a third type of matter. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that.
No, you're dead on about that. It's an ingredient in a soup.
Yes,
it certainly is, and yeah, no, it's not the only ingredient in the soup.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
And the way that you said it was perfect. Like that's and the word coalesce is exactly what it is. It's in order for there to be some type of precipitation of matter out of that has to be a coalescence.
Mhm.
And it again, another analog, so to speak. It's that condensation. It's almost like the other end, if you want to think about it, the other end of a sublimation event. With sublimation, you have a solid going straight to a gas, right? But in this, you have the inverse being true, right? You have the manifest of light and energy being then brought back into matter. It's the other end of the scale of sublimation.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had to say it, Joe, because I think a lot of people think that, hey, just out of light by itself, you can create this. And it doesn't work that way. We've never seen it work that way. But when we start putting the fields in it and start correcting with the frequency and, the amplitude of things really start to change.
Well, right. So structured coalescence is perfect way to put it. And how is that done? Through coherence.
Yeah.
And so there you go. And why coherence? Because, that's the forming of the repeating pattern. Without the forming of the repeating pattern, you don't have the molecular structure for the coalescence to actually amount to anything. At that point, it would actually return back to a photonic state once it is done, leaving a state of compression. So the only thing you would have done at that point is like a refraction, where you'd have, instead of one light, you'd have two in opposite directions, because it works more on a scalar plane than anything else. So either it fuses in the coalescence, or it's going to propagate out in opposing direction.
So let's look at the thunderstorm generator when we talk about it, right? Is it breaking down the elements and putting them back together? Or is it out of it creating some different form of matter coming out the other end and breaking apart and putting things back together? So that's why I have that question about it. What sort of transformation are you getting? And the difference between the two is, if it's something new, then you've created matter out of it and you know it. So you have the fundamental building blocks of a Russell scale working inside of it. If it's separating and then combining it only, that's a total different thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of doing the Russell scale is adding that extra element or removing that element from it in order to get something different. It's the whole structure of it. And that's
right.
happening inside of resonance. You know what I mean? In a chamber where they have to coalesce. You know what I mean?
Well, that's exactly what the plasmoid unification model is trying to achieve. Is exactly what you're saying. Is being able to organize and identify the resonance of each individual element, and have it be controllable in such a way that it could be structured through those resonances, and have different relationships of different elemental elemental matter realized out of the reorganization of the periodic table, more or less. And that works off of octaves and notes and harmonics, and it ties directly in with astrology and stuff like that as well. Like there's all sorts of different things that are taken into account, which is smart, because it's taking environmental circumstances into the equation of the organization of and relationships as well. Things that are that are present during normal formation. Once you can fully understand that, then you become a lot more in control of what your experimentation is going to show, also what your outcome is.
Yeah, you put in. See, this is why it's better to understand volts and amps when you do things like this, right? Because I always tell you, it's cooler with the more voltage you have. Okay, that means that you're in a higher frequency, and then the lower it goes in frequency, the more amps you have in a system. So why does that play a role here? Well, it's about the structure it's creating. You see, You may have just converted a simple magnetic field into a static field and didn't realize it right away, right? But then the matter would realize it. As it's forming and coalescing together, it's changed its structure based on what you just did with your energy. That's the point here. It's the formation of the structure that you're directly manipulating with your frequency. That's the point. So now you put something in and you're going to get something totally different out, all by changing that one little thing.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think that that's stuff that as time goes on, we'll be experimenting more on, here on the channel as well. I think that that's a good place to start is just trying to be able to form different matter structures in resonance, and work out all the dampening and everything like that properly, so it's not being interfered with by the environment as much, to try to gain as much control as possible. Those experiments are actually, I don't want to call them simple, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not super difficult to achieve, because they all follow very basic principles with minimal amounts of material needs. And I think that a great place to start for anybody with stuff like that is just with basic electrolysis, frankly.
Yeah, basically. So let's talk about the hydrogen collider now, or whatever they call it.
Yeah, the Large Hadron Collider.
Yeah. Seriously? Do they really understand what they're doing to this planet? Like, you're creating what, a giant magnetic field in a certain area in order to hold in this particle thing as you zoom it around. I mean, do you realize what implications you're putting this planet through? And then you have multiple ones now? I mean, do they not realize that all of this has to work together in the planet? And when you create that amount of energy in one spot, you're screwing with the environment itself. I mean, how does nobody not know this? Like, when you start to build something for your trillions of dollars you spend on this stuff, you're screwing up our Earth and you don't even understand it. So, I mean, I don't like these things. I don't like these things at all. They didn't think them through. They just thought, oh, let's get excited and build another one and we'll run particles together. Well, yeah, but did you think of everything else you're doing? It's like, oh, let's put a little windmill in the center of the ocean over here or right off the shore, and let's screw up all of what, dolphins, whales, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's just mess them all up. Oh, but that's okay because we got a tiny bit of energy, which, farting in a bucket could have
Well, yeah, I mean, keeping that stuff out of the water is critical to the environment, like the wildlife.
But they don't understand. They're creating frequency into water right away.
Exactly. And all these, not only, like, obviously we jump right to mammals when that comes to play. It's like the dolphins, the whales, whatever. But almost all fish are sensitive to that.
Yeah.
They almost all are sensitive to some kind of electromagnetic field or current in the water. And, that just screws them up 2 ways to Tuesday. But aside from that, kind of backtracking a little bit, you and I had talked like quite a while back when we were touching on Tesla and, his lab on Long Island. And we were kind of going through the whole sequence of events there.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying only a couple years after Tesla's death, they founded Brookhaven National Laboratory. And Brookhaven National Laboratory was only a handful of miles away, right, from where Wardenclyffe was on Long Island. At Brookhaven, and I could be wrong about this, it was the first, if not one of the first, particle colliders, large particle colliders, okay, in the United States. Now, there have been laboratory-sized ones and things of that nature prior, but this was the first time that they took an entire field, and said, okay, this 50 or 100 acres or 200 acres or whatever it is going to be a collider, right? And first off, the collider's underground, obviously, right? There's no buildings surrounding the area, so that should always kind of raise a flag to you as to probably why. But what I found interesting was all of the grass that was grown on top of it, because since there were no buildings, it was all just pretty much grass and the like, right? And what was interesting is when you look at all the satellite imagery of it, you could actually see the magnetic field manifestation in the growth structure of the trees and the grass. It was trees too. Pardon me. It was also trees. But in the center, there was nothing in the dead center of this thing. Nothing grew in that center, and then you actually saw that they grew in a circular pattern, like spheric, like concentrically, sort of around this thing, like a spiral. And then the outside of the entire thing, you could tell where it was because everything was dead on the outside of where this collider was.
Yeah.
It's exactly what was going. Like you could, the trees are responding to these energy patterns and show you where it's bad, show you where it's okay, but show you what the pattern is. And we were able to see that, and it looked like a hurricane. And I went in, and I remember, I don't have the photos readily available to share them, and I apologize. It's coming off the cuff, obviously, but I was able to tweak all the saturation settings and everything like that, and it literally formed what looked like a hurricane. It looked like you were looking at a hurricane radar when I tweaked the contrast and the saturation settings. So, it's just they definitely have a massive environmental impact, and that Large Hadron Collider is orders of magnitude more powerful than that. And that's going directly under cities and stuff like that. It's hard to say what the outside of the life in the area, like the biology in the area and stuff, like the plants and whatnot. It's hard to say what the actual conditions of the atmospheric conditions are directly surrounding that when it's run as well, and how long that even lasts for.
Yeah.
Because there's obviously large degrees of saturation that are occurring.
Large degrees,
like the likes of which we can't even conceive.
It's something I worry about, in a small area. It's when you get to the big ones and you don't realize, the frequency you're putting out could cause maybe an earthquake. Maybe it hits a fault line where you put this stupid thing, and you know what I mean? You end up triggering something. You don't realize there's a cavernous structure down below it. You don't realize, it's going to hit this other area in the world. You know what I mean? You start setting off a bunch of frequencies and a bunch of towers, and you go, oh, well, it reflected off the atmosphere there and came back down, and it hit this certain area. Oh, we didn't realize that. Well, yeah, because you didn't understand the engineering of it. And had you just simply figured that out before you did that, you might be all right. You just wanted to put it together, and you forced an engineer to work on something in order to get what you wanted, not what the bad results were. You know what I mean? I would have never created one of those. No way in this world.
I mean,
it's not worth it.
Well, we could go one step further with this and say that I can't speak for the Large Hadron Collider. Okay, because I don't really know. I know that it's in France and Switzerland, and it's right on the border, and it's kind of built on top of and whatever, but I don't know what the geology is really like there, to be honest. But what I can say about the one at Brookhaven is that it being on the North Shore of Long Island, we didn't have a lot of bedrock and stuff like that there. This thing had been dug into sand, and it's 100% quartz sand too. The entire North Shore of Long Island is just covered in quartz. The South Shore of Long Island is 100% white beach, quartz sand. So, you dig well below the water table, you're in quartz sand, wet, saltwater ridden quartz sand. And
oh my God,
now you're running these huge magnetic fields there. And how
bad
I don't
that
believe
is.
that it stayed in operation all that long, to be real, but they did discover a couple of what they consider to be critical fundamental particles out of that. I think that phi particle was found at Brookhaven.
Dude, think about this. if I wanted to create a magnetic field and I wanted to put it in water and sand, what's going to happen? It's going to be one of the nastiest things to be around ever. Your whole brain is going to feel like it's on fire. So it's like taking the number 2 of your Tesla coil and connected it directly to a coil and putting it in water with, oh, by the way, let's amplify it with some sand. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're doing ourselves a real favor there. Make sure it's wet. Oh, yeah, right in the water. You know what I mean? I can tell you right now that the radiation comes off of it. It's going to kill the plant life. You've oversaturated it and killed like you said, it's just not there. Why? Yeah. Because it can't be there. You're environmentally
and then mind you, they're probably pouring all the tunnels this thing exists in, out of like lime-rich concrete, rebar supported. Like, how many layers to the problem do you want to add? When you start to have hydroxide leach and stuff like that, and you think about the science we talk about all the time on the channel, then think about the pyramids and think about what we always say about the wet quartz and limestone, and with hydroxides being formed. That's literally like, it sounds like the worst idea to run huge high powered electromagnets through that in a more or less residential area. But hey, listen, who the hell am I?
Yeah, that's so funny. So, we're just gonna put it in residential area.
Pseudo residential. They do have their own town for the lab, so. But there are significant laboratory structures like all around there.
God. Well, okay. That thing is just bad. I don't like it. I don't like any of them. Take them out.
I like laughing about this stuff.
You give me trillions and we're going to space. You give them trillions and we got one particle.
Well, yeah. if you need to crack your head on how much is known, mind you that in the late 70s, okay, there was a plan to build some like the world's largest collider in Texas, okay, and it was funded, it was planned, got the green light, and then Reagan came in and he looked at it and said, we're not wasting money on this, cut the program, and then started talking about Star Wars. Like, sometimes deductive reasoning goes a long way. Yeah. So what, wait a second. We had this thing where we're supposed to be at the cutting edge of physics and this is going to bring us to the next level, and then it's planned and it's ready to go. But then we said, you know what? Let the Russians and the Europeans do it. Does that sound like America to you? But then they come out and they say, oh, well, maybe we need to start sending money for lasers in space. Like maybe the reason that it got canceled is because we already realized at that point that we got out of that program what we needed a long time ago, and we're past it, and we don't need to do it. And they say they didn't do Star Wars, right?
Oh, they did.
But they did.
No, they did. How do you think we got particle weapons now?
Right.
the big lasers on ships and stuff. Oh, we didn't do it. Oh, are you sure?
Yeah, no. I think Black budgeted that, started shooting satellites up into space back in 83, 84.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah. That's just ignorance. We've had this stuff for a long time. They just had a lot longer to amplify it. Don't fool yourself on this. If I'm telling you I can create that field in my garage, they've done this 100,000 times already, man. They've manipulated this stuff every way from Sunday. I'm sorry. We know they have all of it, and they're simply hiding it. And for good reason on some of it. I will say that. They have a lot of stuff that could go really wrong in it. But some department should have talked to the other department to put in the Hadron Collider and say, hey, take this big toilet and get it out of here right now. You know what I mean?
Toilet?
Yeah, the big toilet full of money. They keep stuffing it in there like poo. That sucker needed to be removed a long time ago.
Yeah, for sure.
And it just would have, hey, we're in the top secret department. We know you're fucking up the world. Hey, can you please stop that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that level of communication doesn't exist in the compartmentalized, government bureaucracy. It doesn't happen.
Maybe I'm asking too much. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Like, hey, this guy's creating time dilation in his garage. Do you think they've invented it? Yeah, with unlimited budgets and black ops programs. Oh yeah, I think they pretty much got it by now.
For sure, dude. Hey, check the private chat when you have a second.
Okay.
But glad you got a laugh. Where's that toilet they're flushing all the money to? Because I need to find that. Be at the receiving end, being like, I don't care what it's mixed with. I'll sort it out later.
Oh my god, that's so bad.
For real.
Well, I don't even know how to say this on there. Hold on. Go ahead and take up another topic, and I'll write you a message.
All right. Yeah, but I think that the topic of today's conversation, if anybody has a takeaway as to what our opinion is on it, or more or less, is there is this divide that's happening, right? It shouldn't happen. I hope to see it overcome at some point. I hope that there could be more meeting of the minds on both sides of the aisle of science and engineering. But without ignoring the other element of the consciousness aspect of it as well, because I just think that I just think that that's the real missing component.
Yeah. Well, Jarvis kept talking about the bees and that we need to save the bees. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea. Stop doing some of these things out there, because as soon as there's resonance somewhere, the bees are attracted. I got bees in my yard like crazy from all these experiments. Like, you wouldn't believe how many there are out there. And they just keep coming along, finding a new nest every time. And it's not just one or two. You would think I own a bee farm or something, with how bad it gets. So, yeah, there's a whole thing to that.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of Jarvis, is he gonna show face today, do you think?
Yeah, I'm sending him a link right now. I told him.
Cool. Because I think we're gonna have Jarvis on for a few, and I'm gonna take a 5-10 minute break, which is unlike me, so I apologize. And then we'll be back to continue the discussion, because I always love to engage with him to see what he has to say.
Yeah. So.
Also, when it comes to the science and the academic end of things and the engineering end of things, I just want to remind people, I do have a PhD, but I can't show it on air because we'll get kicked off of YouTube. So, we'll link to an OnlyFans in the description if you care to see my PhD.
Oh, that's so bad, Joe.
It's terrible.
It's tattooed on my ass, or it's somewhere else. Got to remove my chonies to show you. It's hilarious, brother. All right, Joe, go ahead and take off to your thing, man. I'll wait for Jarvis to pop on.
All right, and I'll pop back in 5-10 minutes. I'll see you guys soon.
All right.
Thank you. I might be lagging. I hope I'm on time. I tried to pause the live stream chat on YouTube.
Yeah, you're good, man. Yeah.
Oh, man, you guys are just rocking and rolling tonight. I love it. You guys are so right. I felt bad whenever one of the users called Joe Nope instead of straight dope. He said nope. I was like, you know what? You deserve a timeout for that. And I felt bad, but honestly, he deserved that. And
so was that guy the same guy, just using two different
yes.
It really was?
And I found out that later, and I was like, oh my goodness. Cote was like, you didn't get it, Jarvis? I was like, no, I didn't know he was using two different screen names to do it.
So hold on. One guy was really happy with the whole thing, and the other guy was all pissed off about everything. That was the same guy.
It was.
He's
And
like
it took me a
bipolar
second.
guy.
Cote, like Brandon got it before I did. I'm not trying to restrict it. Like I said, like I honestly want to be disproven because that's how we progress. Like I want to know that I'm wrong. I want you to disprove me. Like, and I'll be patient and try to step into your shoes and see what you're saying.
But
But
that's
if
not
I
what that guy
disagree
was
with-
doing.
Yeah, and he never contributes any content to it. He just disagrees and disagrees and disagrees, and we're like, yo, just come on the show and tell us why you disagree. That's all you gotta do.
Dude, I didn't realize that at all. It's the same guy. So check this out. He's saying all these things that make sense, right? In one thing. And then as the other guy, all he's doing is disagreeing with everything. Like, it doesn't matter what the topic is. He was
Yeah, we're just like,
disagreeing.
why? I mean, just tell us why. Be constructive. Like, we want criticism, but like if you don't construct the criticism
Hold on.
the right,
I think you're missing the point. That wasn't why he was doing it then.
I think he was trolling. I mean,
He was
that's
trolling
why,
the chat the whole time with both of them.
yeah, he was trolling, I think. So that's
Yeah.
why I put him in timeout. But
By
it
the
is
way,
what it
for
is.
those who don't know, Jarvis is on there, and I put him as a monitor on there so he could check the chat and drop out the
just
people
because
that are
honestly,
doing weird
like
stuff.
if you're gonna call one of our presenters a nope instead of dope because it was the straight dope, I'm gonna put you in a corner.
Yeah, it's so funny. I didn't realize that was going on. That's so
Yeah.
awesome. Like now, I have to look back on it and see what he was saying.
Yeah, you're gonna be like, dude, like you can't call Joe no.
I'll tell you what, whoever that was, man, you played a number on me. There you go. You won.
But then, well, I'm not gonna say names. Let's not go there.
All right.
Yeah.
Now it kind of makes it funny what was going on versus what I was reading all the time.
And people are like, don't censor him. And like I'm just gonna drop it. I don't want to. People will figure it out. I don't want to say names or anything.
That's just funny.
I
Man.
like to be a good moderator. I don't like to censor. That's not the point. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, look, if you're going to criticize, it's perfectly fine. Just criticize it. Don't just say negative things and don't back it up because it's a rabbit hole. And this channel is trying to get to the point. They're not trying to waste your time as a viewer. We're trying to say, look, please disagree. Please prove me wrong. But take the time to come on the show and tell me why I'm wrong, and we can hash it out.
Dude, he was straight. Hold on, he was straight. Didn't say a word yet, and he's already saying, nope, not the way it works. And you haven't even gotten that through one point yet.
But I took it as him calling dope nope.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. That's why, you can't call Joe nope instead of dope. Is why I put him in timeout first.
Yeah.
But
dude, it was just I looked at it and it was like taking the chat the wrong direction instead of staying with the topic and interacting where we can put the chat on screen.
It was just a classic troll is what he was doing.
Yeah, it ruined the whole thing, so he had to go.
Yeah.
And
it's not the censorship. It's just, when there's a troll, weed them out and call them out.
Oh my God, dude. Censorship? Dude,
we're not censoring. We're not censoring.
Check it out. I'm the first one that gets in the chat when you guys are talking. And, throw up the fireballs, throw up the holes, you know what I mean? The probes. Trust me.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing to do when somebody else is presenting. I'm my own troll in the chat. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Like, people are not understanding it, I guess. Like, we're not trying to silence, and it's not like they're indefinitely banned from the channel. It's just putting them in a 5-minute timeout, it's okay. I mean, it's not like we're trying to censor. We're just saying, like, look, okay, if you want to say no, that's fine, but explain why you say no instead of just saying no, and with no context. It's not constructing any criticism. It's obstructive criticism.
No, it's just
it's just no you know, and all he has to do is come on the show, and we'll be patient enough to listen to his side. You know,
Oh, he said, hold on. I invited him on, by the way, and he told me he couldn't get StreamYard because it costs money, yet they give you a free version.
I've been going off your links for free.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's free. There's no, you just sign up so it puts your name proper in there. You know what I mean? When you come in.
Yeah, you're free. Nathan will send you a link, and you hit the link and make sure your browser is okay with the settings, and you're on there. You don't have to pay for anything.
This guy's just don't put me on the naughty chair now. That's funny.
I like J Jab.
Yeah, dude, that whole chat's awesome, bro.
G Jab, sorry. I call him G Jab because he like, there's so many smart people in the chat. It's hard to say, like, but G Jab's one of them for sure.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, I go on other people's chats, and I, you know, because it's like the relaxing at the end of the day, and I'll just throw up some crazy shit in there just to have some fun, right? To see what kind of reaction you get, and then most people are just tuned into the topic, so they won't pay any mind to it.
I think we should plan like one day where, if we can, throughout one day every year, just be around a campfire, like you said before, because we could all talk around it, and it'd be an event. Just talking around a campfire would be cool, right? Wouldn't that be a cool event?
Yeah. Well, just the topic today, it's like, man, you go back and forth, and some of the discussions we get into about the Russell scale and how it actually works and the frequencies and things. Man, if I could just show you everything, I would. I can't, but it all like coalesces in there. I mean,
yeah, it's easier to think of it as a broad picture, like we were getting at before, you know, with Joe. Like a holistic picture is so much easier, you know, instead of dissecting it down. The more you dissect it down, like you're compartmentalizing your intelligence, and you're not understanding a broad view, an outside view that will actually help you in the long run. Instead of dissecting it down, you have to think about it as a large scale type of system, and it'll start making a lot more sense, you know, because you can either go up towards the solar system or down towards an atom when it comes to physics, you know. And I think I've actually unified gravity and electromagnetism, but I don't promote it, you know. But it's helped me have a model of physics, you know, because I was saying that it was hard for me to visualize in my mind the physics, and it does take you a while, but once you can visualize it in your mind, you can construct it, you know. And that's why Don Smith and Tesla and people that start understanding what's really going on can construct it better, because they have a better understanding, and it's more artistic. That's why I love Tesla for calling his last patent the art.
Well, the straight nope is back, and I found the toilet that the government was flushing all the money down, but looks like Doge already found that one. Yeah.
Doge will find it first, man.
Yeah.
You're on it.
But I'd say there wasn't shit in there, except I'd be lying.
Oh, that's good. Love it. It's good. It's just a toilet full of shit, man. That's all it is.
It was.
Hey, but that's why the majority elected him to try to hold that promise, to weed out the swamp. That's all I'm going to say. I don't like politics, but at least the majority of Americans want him to weed out the swamp, so it's okay with me.
Yeah. Wasn't trying to open up the huge political can of worms, but anybody that wants to gut the government's a friend of mine.
Yeah. I will say just one thing, though. I don't know. I guess I like whenever with Elon Musk. I don't want to go into politics. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, probably best you don't. We don't dive into that a whole lot. It goes in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I don't want to. The thing is, I don't want to alienate people. We do this for science, man. It's bad enough for alienating people with what we're saying.
All right, I'm just going to add in one more thing, though, okay? And then it's over. I'm just hoping that the people that was on the receiving money of all that money that we were flushing away, okay, it's still looking straight down the pipe for money to flow because I got a surprise for them.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. Dude, Joe, you're the man. I just gotta say, it's worth talking about it that far. You know what I mean? Joe, I love you, man.
Mouth open and all, baby.
My God, he ran the Russell scale right through his butthole, dude. Is what he's saying.
Woohoo!
He
I mean,
was
how often
combining
do I
everything with the nuts.
Yeah, what was that movie? Back in the day. Oh yeah, American Pie. Remember Shit Break? That guy.
Oh,
Oh, that was so great.
Oh man. Anyway,
wow, where do you go from there?
I wish I could go there, but it's a different time for politics. I'm sorry.
yeah, we could do that on my channel someday. I'll create.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna create the Straight Nope channel, and then we can do it separately on there.
Yeah. Straight nope. Dude.
So did you realize that guy was the same guy with two different things? Did you read the chat?
Yeah.
I mean, I loosely follow the chat when I'm on, but it's hard to keep up. It's because I'm not in front of a computer screen, I'm in front of my phone, so it's very small.
Well, it was a little shady what he was doing, and
yeah, we don't need to go back into it. Honestly, I'm going to be straight and saying nothing anybody ever says. I've been called worse. Nobody's ever going to bother me, but there's a time and place. So if you pull that shit, you're going to get axed, and that's that. Yeah. What are you going to do?
And it's not like they're permanently banned or anything. It's time out.
All right, guys.
Yeah. No more.
Be done with that. Dude, anytime you guys want, man, throw that up the holes in the chat, everything, dude. Makes me laugh every time I see it. It's like the funnest thing when people use all the emojis, man. Go right through it. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You guys,
so Jonathan, what you got going on, man?
So hold on. Are you guys barred from selling energy generated from the vacuum back to the grid? Yes. Let me just tell you the answer is yes. You never connect that to the grid because they like to send people out that find you and find out why your bill's going in reverse. Like they go first your meter, see if it's unlocked, and say, in the old days, you used to take it and flip it upside down and plug it back in and run in reverse. Now
there is a way to do it though, okay? And I'm throwing it out there, and you do as you may, okay? If you have solar panels and a contract with the power company for an electric meter, okay? Mm-hmm. Then the way that works is you never utilize the energy that you produce. Okay, you use off the grid, it monitors it, you put back into the grid, and then it's an offset calculation. There's certain times of the day where you're going to be in a state of overproduction, certain times of the day and year where you're going to be in a massive overproduction, you're going to be putting in more, so it'll run in reverse. Then
there's some insurance companies that will cover that, but you have to be in specific states for that because you can give it back to the power company. I'm trying to not cut you off. Please continue.
Yeah, and it could be different everywhere too. I know that's how it at least works by me, and I've heard that from others too. So there's got to be some kind of consistency. Now, a couple things. First off, the rate that they give you back is less than you pay. You always got to bear that in mind. It's a money-making proposition for them, even though you own the panels. All right.
Right. And it now, on average may take, from 5 to 10 years though on that.
To equal out, I mean, it could. Now, if you were to do what this guy said, though, and create free energy and put it in, it's already running in reverse, and you could put as many panels on your house as you want. So technically,
that's like a slow progress of what we've been talking about, of how to quickly do it. Solar panels, I've thought of how to go into that company, but I don't want to because it's too slow.
Hold on.
You can literally.
I think you guys are missing something. For an average inventor that would do it, they're probably not thinking about frequency. They're not trying to match the energy that's coming through it. So it may be that they're putting in potential instead of putting in, say, the correct voltage for AC. So you just got to keep that in mind. The best thing you could do, just run the power in your shop, run your little play toys in there, and turn it off at the end of the day. I'll be honest with you. Putting it back in the grid is just a bad experience altogether. you can miss the mark completely, run it through there, and then, like I said, they show up in vans at your house, and then they start taking your free energy.
And that's why I think Joe was trying to start it off like that, though, to say that you can kind of use insurance and say that you're having solar panels, but use the solar panels as an excuse to do what we're saying.
Correct. And that would put them off the mark, because what are they going to do? Audit you? They have no right to audit you and your consumption. They have no right to audit your
right. They don't know what you're putting into the grid based off the solar cells.
Yeah, hold on. Just so we understand, there's people out there that got sued for this, and then they had to pay back bills on it based on the energy they thought they were being taken from them from the power company, because they said they were stealing from
everything's
them.
Against it. It's
because they don't recognize free energy experiments, so they don't give you credit for that. So in the court of law, you stole the energy.
Okay, so another circumstance. Now, if you were to run your house, okay, under these types of circuits, and you were to run it at high efficiency and be putting back almost entirely, you're going to have a hell of a time explaining it.
Exactly.
But there's no precedent or case law that says that you're restricted to inefficient, what do you call it? Like inefficient appliances.
That's why I was thinking where you're going with the solar panels makes absolute sense, because then you can actually go on an insurance level, because they won't know what you're talking about with a watt or joule. They don't know the difference.
Yeah, but if you start creating a lot of digital waves, hold on.
I know. I don't want to.
They're going to find you.
I know. I'm not. That's why it's tricky. I'm not trying to give advice, but I see where Joe is saying.
Yeah, the loophole is that you have a contract for buyback and a provided meter, and you have a right to production. Right. So, right. So you and you have a right to production, and that right to production, right? That right to production isn't limited to one solar panel or solar panels all over your entire house and property. It's just a sellback contract. So however you pump it back into the grid is covered by that contract. If they ever were to come to you, they can't say that you're stealing, because they already agreed to buy the energy you produce.
That's why it's based off states and everything, and insurance companies. What I say is non-grid based. It's like, instead of doing any grid-based system, it's just making your own power in your own house.
Okay, but just understand, guys.
When you go grid-based, you are going to be located.
Yeah.
FCC, like we're talking with spark gaps. Yes, you can use spark gaps, but you're just broadcasting to be located.
Yeah.
You're better off being off-grid at that point and having a switch.
That's the whole freaking point, isn't it?
Yeah, I want to hear.
You're literally off-grid to be off-grid, not to give it back to the grid. I mean,
exactly.
Like I said,
the grid systems are always going to be against us, because they've tried the grid system and they got it tied down with any solar-based grid-based system and all that stuff. Once you sell the power back, they're like, "How are you selling this much power back?" And you're going to have to explain how you're selling more power back than a 200-watt panel. You're like selling back a kilowatt, and they're like, "Well, how are you getting a kilowatt of power off a 200-watt?" So it's really,
it's like, well, that's not my job. That's not my job to prove. That's your job to prove how I'm doing.
No, I know, but why go down that path when it should not even be grid based? Is what I'm getting at.
Well, right, it shouldn't, but like for what it's worth. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna play devil's advocate with this. Okay. If you have a power need that exceeds what you are creating, okay, which could well be the case, because it's you'd have to have cells, and there's all different rates of it and everything like that, right? Case in point is that you need that grid hookup to a degree as just a backup, if anything else. Either that, or you're gonna, unless if you have it to the point where it's working continuously, whatever, you're gonna be in brownout situations and stuff like that constantly. Okay, so you need to be supplemented by the grid just for the insurance policy of living in modern society.
The average person now would, yes, absolutely.
Right. So,
But I'm saying if
that's the
you
point.
knew how to be independent with energy, though, you didn't have to do that. If you knew how to be independent, you wouldn't have to involve the grid at all.
Well, right, but it's about powering modern,
Yeah, that I
everything
agree.
modern
Right
with
now,
it.
right now, yeah. But that's why, like, even relying on the grid, I mean, you have to. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, the long-term goal of what I see is it would be decentralized from the grid, just like decentralized finance, you know?
Right. And it's just like if you had a yurt, that was in the middle of the woods and you were running something like this, and all you were looking to do was power a light bulb and a refrigerator, and that's all you were looking to do, then you're
That's all I
fine,
need.
right? But
Right.
chances are, under that circumstance, you still probably have a generator backup just because,
No. Teach a man to fish. Eventually, they'll know how to fish, bro. You
Yeah,
don't even need a
that's
backup
fair.
generator.
Well, regardless, I mean, under that circumstance, you could make it work. But with everything that,
Yeah,
like, I wasn't running my
good to
house
have.
with 5
It's good
bedrooms
to
and 4
have,
bathrooms,
but-
and
it's good to have, but think out further, and you can maybe agree with me that you may not need a backup generator.
right. I mean, looking forward, absolutely not.
Right.
I would just love
Yeah.
to see the day that it could run, like the McMansion with the hot tub and all that stuff, and
Right.
not worry about a brownout. That's all I'm talking about.
I mean, it takes time. We're just making the waves in the pond. That's all we're doing now. But eventually, it'll get there.
Yep.
It's
Keep the ripples coming, right? And you'll have the
Right.
tsunami. That's how this conversation started.
That's exactly what's going on. It's gonna get there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that's about enough of the brownouts and the ripples in the water after you did them, and then the electricity.
Yep.
It's just thinking about, like, legal issues. I think it's better to just try to make a small power unit than to power your house. But that small power unit can get you off the grid, and that's a good start. Even if it's just a 10-watt bulb to get you off the grid, it's a power system that at least you don't have to use the grid. You utilize.
Well, yeah, you'd be the only guy on the block during the whole time it's a brownout with their lights on, right? Like they're not going to investigate that. Don't worry about that.
Well, let me tell you something. Like, as somebody that works in the legal field day in, day out, like, one thing I will tell you that fears companies like this and why you might not even run into a problem is because if they realize what's actually going on, they don't necessarily want a case like that going to court and having any sort of precedence or case law associated with it. And it's better off not to have any sort of definitive decision on such, matters that could rip open a huge hole in their wallet.
The similar thing would be with cryptocurrency, though. Instead of the cryptocurrency, being decentralized finance, it's the same thing as decentralized power. So it would be a similar thing as what's going on with the Bitcoin and stuff. You get what I'm saying?
Hold on.
Scenario.
Let me say this. There's only so long any government goes without regulating anything that has to do with money. So you say it's deregulated now. Just wait. They've already put rules on it. They're going to put more.
I said decentralized.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Well, it's hard for them to put rules on what doesn't exist, Nathan.
They already did.
you see where I'm like?
No, they already have. They already put people in jail for this stuff for Bitcoin. There are rules. So, yeah, we all like to think it's pretty much.
We just want to snap our fingers and have it overnight, but like we have to realize just the discussion here could take 5 years to get into fruition. Yeah,
I mean those banks don't own everything for nothing. I mean they're not going to let you pass that by. Come on now. The whole job of the rich people is to put their thumb right on us so that, you know what I mean? We have to hunch down to get through life. So don't think that they're not going to take their cut. That's their job. They're the biggest gangsters there are.
Well, listen, if the banks are going to go bust, now's the time to do it because they ain't getting the bailout, and then you can sit there and be like, well, nobody owns my house anymore but me. Like
I thought they might have been on the trajectory to bust, but I don't think they are now.
yeah. I don't know. Like if the inflation rates were going to keep on going up and stuff like that, they were probably.
But once energy goes down, inflation goes down. That's really a basic
Yep.
thing that
Tends to be.
So that's all I'm going to say about that.
So Jarvis, tell us about those bees you were talking about. You mentioned it several times in the chat.
Bees are so fascinating. Like, I've got some land that I really don't know what to do with, but I'm thinking about putting a bee farm on there because honey is a good anti-allergen. The bees will go to all the different flowers and pollen and gather it into honey, and the local honey is a good anti-allergen because you're at least getting a sweet thing and accommodated with the pollen in your area. So it's honey is great for sweeteners, anti pollen, whatever allergens. The beeswax is so phenomenal to me. The beeswax is a dielectric, and it can't go too deep into this topic, but it's a cavernous structure. Whenever they build the beehive, it's a hexagonal type of cavernous structure that they make, and that can naturally beam out electromagnetic frequencies that the bees can use as a beacon to get back to the beehive. And if we're polluting the atmosphere with cell phones and all kinds of electromagnetic radiation that throws them off, they don't know how to get back to the beehive, and they get lost, and the population drops.
Now, there's a lot of symbiosis that occurs within, a beehive because you have the resonating beating of the bee's wings within the hive that actually allows for the structuring of the wax when it's deposited.
It cools it.
Right. So
dual purpose.
Structuring of you see where I'm going, right? So there's the structuring of the wax. Okay, that's on the cold side of the energy structure, right?
Yes.
But also it's geometric in its nature. It's also structured similarly molecularly to its macroscopic form of how they form it in the hexagonal pattern, right?
So this is where I was getting at, where silicon's good with like quartz crystals and stuff, but carbon is great for organic materials. And the wax of that is an organic material that's hexagonal. So it's more of a carbon-based crystal structure than a silicon-based.
Exactly.
I'm trying to get at that.
Now, so you have the molecular structure that's influenced by the resonating frequency of the beating of the wings. And then you have the macro structure of the hexagonal honeycomb pattern that is manifest from their building of it. So since everything's in resonance, and it's all in resonance with the beating of the wings in the first place, there's your symbiosis. Now you have an amplification of the resonating of the wings that formed the structure in the first place. Now
that's what acts as a beacon, because there's classes of bees, you know what I'm saying? That like the purple honey that you would really want for therapeutic type things that we can't discuss, but the purple honey from the queen itself, and the queen's usually
the royal jelly.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Scrumdilly. That's Pooh Bear. If Pooh Bear is gonna get some honey, he wants the purple honey, you know what I mean?
So the purple honey is what decides what the larvae are ultimately going to be, whether what they're going to be, right? So
that's good.
So hold on. You're creating in the beehive an electorate already.
Yes.
So that's kind of the thing. They use the resonance of the frequency of their wings to create the structure of it, and it's structuring the electorate itself.
Say that's a big part of it, yes. And I mean, you could associate what the wax goes around for the hexagonal structure as like a cardboard kind of structure. in a way. So they use like a cardboard and then wax it in a hexagonal structure. They'll wax the cardboard hexagonal structure and beeswax to produce the lattice. So once they do that, the cavernous structure effect from Grebennikov, but this is related to, you know, the physics that, and, you know, I can go into physics, but basically de Broglie
It's multi-layered is the thing. It's multi-layered. So you get the cavernous materials effect, but that's a secondary byproduct of what's already going on the basic physics.
There is no end all be all.
Right. It's the layering of effects.
Yes. And it's
it makes sense when you hear Grebennikov talk about the energy that's coming from it, and then he felt it, and the temperature difference. It all makes sense in all of it when you start to say he made an electret out of the beehive is what's going on. Now it makes perfect sense to anybody who looks at it.
Yeah, he would actually make a chair that had a beehive above it, and you would sit in the chair, and they said that it felt like your temperature dropped whenever you sat under this thing. And as your temperature dropped in your body, you actually had headache alleviation. Just from a beehive sitting in a chair and above you. That's what Grebennikov showed in his book. If you haven't read it, like, it's a great book. And like I told Nathan before, it was. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so if you have all these bees in a hive and everything's in resonance and it's acting as an electret, right? And then there's also a form of capacitance and amplification through all the resonance by the bees continuously beating their wings. And we know that the capacitance and certain amounts of saturation would also be held by the bee for a certain amount of time. And now it takes off out of the hive. Now it's still in resonance with the hive. And then you look at the size of the bee and the size of its wings and then the rate of the flap. And then you realize that there's sorts of issues
a little
there.
Entanglement.
There's some issues there, but
a
you
little
realize
entanglement.
that
It's entangled.
So you know,
and it travels faster than light. Once you get entangled, you know that. But they're entangled to the hive. They're
entangled to the hive, but their flight characteristics are influenced by the capacitance of the resonance of the hive.
Yeah.
So, you know, they could go off and do all their flights and so on and so forth, but they always have to return to the hive. That's what it kind of boils down to. And if you were to, I believe that if you were to take a bee away from a hive for long enough, I don't think that it would have the same physical abilities, you know, that it had previous to. That's where I'm going with this.
I wanted to do an experiment where you just took a huge Faraday cage of a beehive, like a half dome structure, to where they can travel outside of it, like a Faraday cage. They can travel outside that dome and come back to the hive. But at least in that dome, they have no interference when it comes to electromagnetic transverse waves. So maybe they'll be able to find the hive better by putting like a chicken cage Faraday dome over the hive, like at you know, a good distance to where they can still get out to the honeycombs and stuff and do their thing. But just see, like, do they navigate better once they come inside the dome, because the influence of all of our electromagnetic radiation isn't throwing them off as much. You know,
right.
So
if you had multiple hive, boxes and stuff in the same area,
right?
You know, and you also had their food source inside the area, that too might influence their patterns and everything.
I was going to put honeysuckles all around, you know, but once they come into the Faraday cage, theoretically, if it's transverse, it should not interfere with them as much. So as long as they come through the chicken wire dome, they'll be in a safe zone to where no electromagnetic radiation would interfere with their navigation to the hive. And just study the difference of a big dome of a beehive or several beehives, like you say, and see if there is any confusion once they get outside that dome and go towards the honeysuckles. Like, do they get more confused about where they need to go back, and then once they go back through the Faraday cage, do they sense the hive better?
I just wonder if their absence from the direct reach of the hive for any extended period of time while still being nourished would lead to any ability, like loss of ability of them to fly or anything like that. That's sort of what I'm curious of.
So are you worried about, like, once they get outside the Faraday dome, like they
I'm just
have
saying generally, Faraday dome or not, if you were to take a bee away from its hive out of resonance and capacitance, right, for long enough,
yeah,
you know, to the point where they kind of lose their charge, so to speak, of the hive, would they A, be able to find their hive again, or B, would they even be able to fly at all?
I think they lose their bearing. It's almost like a young bird that's separated from its mom at birth will get a little bit of a neglect from the mom, you know, and then its bearing is not as good as the older birds that weren't pulled from the hen and reintroduced. Like, they lose a little bit of part of their natural ability to do that. And by bringing the bees out of their atmosphere like that, I think their bearing would be thrown off, you know. And
Right. I mean, and it's not a nice thing to do, but it is
I know.
also
That's why
it is a proof of
I just want a dome, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just want to have a beehive and a dome, because when the dome's big enough and you just fill the outside it with the honeysuckles and a bunch of pollen resources, and just see what happens when the bee comes outside that dome and goes for the honey, you know, and how it brings it back. Does it look more confused coming out of the dome compared to coming in, is what I want to know.
That's fair.
I see a lot of bees on the ground that look like they're fine and they can't get back to where they were. They just lose all reason to live. You know what I mean? And
I get beat up about stuff like that. I love bees.
I just wonder if they maybe got a disconnect, like you guys are saying. Maybe
I think so, yeah. It's just like if you had an ant pile, right? And ants were going towards the chocolate bar and then they're coming back. If you like physically separate that line between them going there and back, they can't smell it anymore. So their senses get thrown off. And once you do that, they'll actually scatter randomly across the line that you make, because they can no longer sense the trail back. You've seen that, right? If you have an ant like marching line and you intercept that line, they'll be confused.
Oh yeah, no, they get all screwed up. I've done that experiment before when I had them in my office one time.
That's how I picture the bees.
Yeah. Yeah, that could well be. I mean, I know that the ants work off of a different principle generally because
it's
of
more of a
scent tracking,
smell,
but it's
actually.
still the same. Yeah, scent tracking. But at the same time,
bees are more electrostatic. Yeah, I agree.
But you know, it's still the same idea, though. I mean, they have to home. And most animals have some kind of innate homing ability, homing ability rather. But yeah, I just think that the fact that they fly is pretty miraculous in itself.
Is.
Like proportionally, like it doesn't make much sense. You'd never design an airplane like that. Like by any means, and yet they're more mobile than that. They can fly in any direction.
Well, that makes you.
They're so interesting. I just want to say,
beyond.
Sorry, Nathan.
Real quick, if you bring in resonance into the conversation of anti-gravity into a bee, the resonance of their wings being so much in tune with each other may have that effect, being that they're so small, because gravity affects them differently than it would us.
Well, chitin, their wings are made of chitin, okay? And when chitin travels through air, it's like Teflon traveling through air. The chitin is going to gain a negative charge, and that's why I was saying in the past too, it's a spider web will actually attract the wing. It'll track the charge of the wing. A spider web will.
Yeah, and Nate Center picked up what I was putting down. He said they don't fly, for what it's worth. You know, they loved it.
Yeah.
That's thank you. You said the quiet part out loud. I was trying to extrapolate that into this conversation. There's no reason that they should be off the ground with that wing size.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
they're not utilizing flight characteristics is the whole point. And
But
it's not.
at the same time, what I would say though is, you know, the modern definition through calculus of how they fly is based off calculus. And like I'm saying, if you use calculus, you'll get it wrong. Okay. The way they explain it would be more accurately explained by the rate of their wing up and down speed. The rate is what they're trying to prove with calculus, but it's much easier with trigonometry or art, you know, graphic representation. Like,
And just remember that beat
it's
rate
the rate.
of their wings is the wave frequency that they're putting off of the waves, which is analogous to the
They get more
charge.
power. They get more power in one way than the other.
Right, and that's analogous to the charge, the resonance of the charge that's also going to be on their wings. So, which is also in resonance with the entire hive that they're holding the capacitance of. That's what I was trying to bring together.
Yeah, we discussed this. Was it yesterday? Like a holistic viewpoint where there's entanglement that happens, and like I said, like only intuitive people like we try to bring on this channel can sense those types of things, you know. And but there's quantum entanglement that we'll never be able to really understand, but it happens, and all we have to say is, as engineers, we know it happens with quantum tunneling and different effects of where like engineers can holistically view it, you know. And when you dive it down too far, you're gonna be a dizzy dog.
Yeah, intuition's massive on this, and that has to do with the null zones, you know. And when anything enters into a null zone of equilibrium, you have heightened intuition, which if part of your anatomy, like let's say in a bee, and I can't say what this would be, it's not like I know that specifically, but if something in your anatomy is therefore a sensory organ to be able to take that intuition of an equilibrium and be like this way, you know, like it doesn't need to be
different perspective
or whatever. It's just they know because of that intuitive organ that they have, sensory organ.
I saw something, not to go too woo, but like when it comes to autistic children that can't even speak and they have to literally like write out or put like letters on a board to say what they want to say. These autistic children are so telepathic that they'll like literally have cards and show the mother, and then the autistic child on the other side of the room will say what that card is. These are the type of autistic children that can't speak like us, you know.
Well, by the way, they just did a study on that, scientific study, and I think there was a 95% success rate.
Yes.
And they said that it was one parent greater than the other. And in some cases it was the father, and in other cases it was the mother. So there was no consistent factor there, but it was the consistent factor was it was one or the other parent, and that level of intuition was 95% and beyond.
Wouldn't it be interesting if like the more male parent was from a boy and a more female parent was from a girl child?
Well, it could have to do with segments of the genetic code that are passed along. So whatever segment of the genetic code is responsible for that either came from parent A or parent B, right?
Yeah.
And
it seems, yeah.
It's so
like, why wouldn't it be both, for instance?
Because that segment of the genetic code only could come from one parent.
It was a what do they say, a question that basically I agree with you on. It was a redundant question. Basically, I agree, because so for them to be a dominance on one parent or the other, instead of both. Are there any examples where both parents actually had a registration instead of just one?
Not in that particular
square.
study.
It's
Not
a
in that
Punnett
particular
square.
study. Right.
So just like with brown eyes versus blue eyes statistics, I'm trying to visualize it genetically like a Punnett square, because that's what you learn in genetics. It should be a Punnett square. Do you remember that?
I mean, I've heard that before.
So I'm just trying to, in my mind, build a construction. So if there's no example of both the mom and the dad, but just the mom or the dad, it seems like it's a genetically favorable side instead of both. And you would think maybe it's both. You could think that, you know.
Right. I mean, in that circumstance, the question would then tend to be, where is that segment of the gene that's responsible for this? Where can you see? Right. So when you could see that segment of the gene, you know that that's actually the gene that leads for that, interconnectivity. Now, what's interesting? Okay, now this will be woo. Okay, and I'm just postulating right off the top of my head as general, but
I love woo, man.
There's a little woo.
Audience does too.
So what if the reason that kids that are that deeply autistic, but also share that same connection with only one parent, what if that particular gene is a consciousness gene? Okay, and the reason for their lack of cognitive ability in that regard and communication skills is because it is overlapping with that parent. What if that's the mechanism of that autistic condition as opposed to a symptom?
That's why I'm trying to Punnett square it. You get what I'm saying? So we can like build a little, like a FBI agent like Lincoln, like, okay, if this is true,
right.
You know what I mean?
Right. So that's where I'm going with this. You see, like maybe that is the mechanism of that particular disability as opposed to a symptom of it. Because so here's a direct correlation.
It's gotta be genetic though. If it's not, is what I'm getting at, is got to be genetic if it's not both. In any case.
But hold tight. They did similar types of experiments under Kozyrev. Okay, and Kozyrev, he did the mirror experiments and stuff. Okay, but he also did, like telepathy type tests as well, along with it, where they would basically have people on similar ley lines, okay, within these spirals, and half of the control would be shown an image, and the other half of the control would say, if you have something come to mind, draw it.
So the location was important with that.
Location and the fact that they were connected in these in the spiral mirrors. Okay, the aluminum spiral mirrors. Okay, and what they found was that in certain atmospheric conditions, I think it had to be clear. I forget what the detail with that was, but that the success rate was exactly identical to what that study showed, 95%.
Dude, 95% is
so, but
beyond.
It's right. So it's not 96%. It's not 94%. In both of these things, 95% of the time. So you're talking about
even 51% is just crazy. You know what I mean?
But now you're talking about an induced phenomena.
Yeah, obviously.
That's exactly the same.
Because they could argue 51% is beyond the norm, but 95 is
95 is right. That's outside the margin of error. And they also had hundreds of images to choose from and stuff. So it's outside the realm of coincidence.
Right. Yeah. Was that the same children that were autistic that couldn't speak?
No, that's what I'm saying. The difference is that the Kozyrev stuff was induced.
So binaural and everything.
No, not binaural. Kozyrev, he came up with an aluminum mirror that worked off of the golden ratio. Okay, so basically he would take aluminum panels, 6 foot, 8 foot tall aluminum panels. He would put the panel in a spiral to the golden ratio and put a chair in the middle. Okay, and that was the whole thing.
Yeah. So I actually can't talk about time dilation, so it's hard for me to go any further on that.
Well, the direct mechanism of Kozarev's experiments was all time dilation related.
That's why I can't really. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
All comes back to the same things, huh?
That's what I'm saying. Everything we talk about, it sounds like we're talking about the same thing when we're talking about different things, but that's because it's all the same. And I've been saying that since the second time I was on. It's all the same.
Yeah. But at least we're spreading their awareness. That's all that matters. You know,
Yep.
I think that they're getting it in chat. Like, chat's just so cool.
Oh yeah, they definitely know a lot more than we do. So,
But with the beehives, would you be interested, Nathan, to maybe fund saving bees at one point?
to like have beehives like in a farm
Like a charity?
to do
Yeah.
what with it? I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
missed
just-
what's going on.
Like, instead of, like just a charity to help bees and help understand why they're getting thrown off. If that's the case, we need to solve it. You know what I mean? I don't know. Not personally funded, just like a campaign where we're like, hey, let's figure out why the bees.
Yeah, if somebody wanted me to be involved in that, I would. That would be interesting. Yeah,
that would be a cool campaign. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'd like to understand the simple question that I asked. Like, would they be more confused outside the Faraday cage than inside? It's a simple question. And I'm not asking for money. I'm just saying to campaign the thought as an experiment because I'd like to do it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I like to figure it out. There's a ton of bees outside my house. I tell you that all the time.
I'll put like a bunch of honeysuckles around it.
Yeah, there's dude. They have little bushes they like, so you'll get them all year round. As long as you keep that bush good, they're all over it. So
I just think they're fascinating creatures.
Well, if you ever figure out how that works and you find out that the same exact theory works to homing yellow jacks, I think we have a crisis solving problem that would fund your bee research. Because if you could figure out a way to get yellow jacks to think that the fry machine is their home,
yeah, or say wasps.
Well, that's yellow jacks are the same deal.
Right.
Wasp, yellow jacks, yeah.
I deal with a lot of wasps, but yeah, if you were to just like sonar, like with real sound, a charged electrosonic pulse, like would that drive certain bees off? You know what I mean?
Not drive them off. Make them think that the friggin' grinder in the middle of whatever's emanating it is their house, man. Those things are straight from the devil.
I don't like that though. I like just like throw them off. Like I don't like killing anything. Like even a spider. Like my biggest fear is a spider. And if I woke up in the middle of the night, I'd probably want to smash it on my face if it was on my face. But like if I'm awake, I try to save it still. Even though I fear it a lot, I don't want to kill it. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's cool. It's not even a matter of fear with those things. They just ruin your barbecue, and I love barbecuing. That's the problem.
I'm just saying. I try not to even kill things I fear. Is what I'm trying to get.
You know what?
Oh no, you're better off not killing things you fear. You're better off learning from them.
There's a rule that goes on. If it's outside, you can live. If you come in my house, you're done.
Yeah.
If you're a bug that comes in my house, dude, your days are numbered.
Right. Once you breach the domain, that's it.
Yeah. Outside, you can do whatever you want.
I still disagree, though. It'll be inside, and I'll still try to save it. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll have to get you a robe and send you to Tibet. What can I tell you?
I don't know. It's just the way I think. It's like if I look different, I wouldn't want somebody to stomp on me.
That's fair. Listen, I love that train of thought. It's wonderful. I mean, practice it sometimes.
Yeah,
I think it would be a good meditation.
don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Look, some things you're just not smart enough to get out. Like if you get a mouse in your garage, right, and you open the big garage door, it's like, hey, get out, buddy. And it's like, no, I'm staying here. Then you're gonna have to take some alternative measures, right?
What if you just made like a breadcrumb trail outside? And
They
then,
still
like,
don't
you
listen.
started-
No.
cheese, try some cheese, like
No, because
You
they
don't
know
wanna-
you got the cat food in the garage. So you know, for the
Crank up a Tesla coil, man. You know, charge the room up. They'd be like,
that
Yeah,
still
they
doesn't
know.
stop them. They don't care.
they know the main supply. Yeah, so you got like cat food, and they're like, "Hey, you're gonna put a cheese crumb
Yeah,
trail
the old-
down? I can get the."
Dude, I literally had a mouse. Like I put mouse traps in, right? And
You're
he literally
smart, man.
stood on top of the mouse trap and was eating the peanut butter off of it and was looking at me like, what are you going to do? Huh? How fat man, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm going to get the sticky pads and you're not getting off of it now. That's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to literally put like a bunch of it in the center. Yeah, I don't have mice anymore.
Well, all right. Well, you got
That's
rid of
the
it.
piece,
I
man.
was going to say you could try dressing up like a cat, but that's only because I wanted to see you dressed up like a cat.
like a scarecrow, but a scare cat, like in the corner, like. Meow.
I literally have the play of the cats in my garage with me and a broom. But yeah, that's just a horrible thought. Me in tights going with a broom doing like this in my garage. Yeah, that's not gonna work.
I mean, listen, I could have just said snakes, but nobody likes them either.
Oh,
Like you could have put a couple snakes in your garage and you wouldn't have had any mice either, but you know, whatever.
Hey,
I had a raccoon come in and wanted to like sit right there beside me. And this came in the garage. I guess it was a pregnant female. And it was thinking like, yeah, this is my garage now, bitch. And I'm like, no, I'm going to take my level and a rope and I'm going to grab you and put you outside. That one had to change right away.
Yeah, and all I want to say is, if Indiana Jones can't handle snakes, I feel okay if I'm afraid of snakes too.
Yeah, you know, like, nothing great about them.
No, but like,
Cured the mice problem.
imagine a cobra. Like, really, would you really want to face a cobra?
It could
No.
just like got a corn snake, I guess, but like it's got to be a cobra. You know, listen, man, I thought I was extra.
Yeah, like I'm not talking gardener snake. I'm talking about like a viper or something. You know what I mean?
Right,
Dude,
right. If you're gonna have a snake in your garage, you better make it a good one.
Yeah, I'm okay with snakes that I know that aren't venomous or anything. I can identify them, you know, gardener snakes and stuff. But like, I'm talking about like this vicious snake. I'm afraid of those. I'm afraid of big ass spiders. Like, I think big ass spiders are actually more fearful to me than snakes.
Okay, guys, I got a story for you. My brothers decided to play a trick on my mom. She's in the shower, right? So they go in her room and they take this 10-foot dead snake and they coil it up on the bed, right?
Oh no.
And then they all stand by the door and wait for her to come out, you know what I mean, out of the bathroom into the room. So you can imagine you got like 4 guys sitting there listening to the door. And then all of a sudden they didn't hear anything right away. So they go, hey, Mom, look on the bed. You know what I mean? And then as soon as they did, man, all you heard was screaming throughout the house and get that freaking thing out of my freaking bed. You know what I mean? Yeah, they were up doing laundry all night cleaning that stuff up. But dude, it was hilarious.
It is funny though. Like, I would freak out. I mean, just like, if it's okay if they pre-warn me like that, I probably wouldn't freak out like that. But like, if I were to just climb in bed and saw a snake looking thing, you know what I mean? I'd be like, oh
No, I'd like literally lose my mind.
Yeah,
I worked in a
no
boatyard
warning?
when I was a kid, and they used to play friggin' tricks on me all the time because they were a bunch of assholes. And you know, one of my jobs was like, you know, if we moved the boat out or whatever, and we had all the like chalking and stuff like left behind, I just had to like go grab it, stack it up, you know, cinder blocks of wood, whatever. So this one time, there was a mouse inside of one of the cinder blocks, like the holes in the cinder blocks. He covered it with a piece of plywood, and then told me to go, you know, clean it all up. And they literally just sat there and watched as I took this piece of plywood out, reached into the cinder block to pick it up, and the mouse ran up my arm, and I nearly crapped myself. But what was worse than that was this time, like, I used to take out the garbages at the end of the day or whatever. They were all around the perimeter, and they'd just be like, "Oh, just go take out that one garbage real quick." Yeah, okay. Well, this massive seagull flew into the garbage can. Okay, and they put a piece of plywood on top of it. And I'm sitting there saying, "What's this piece of plywood do?" I'm like thinking someone was using it as like a table or work surface or something, because we did all sorts of mechanic work all over the yard. So I don't think anything of it. I literally take the piece of plywood, rip it off, and I think I might have had a mini heart attack or a stroke or something. Like, I don't know. This bird probably weighed like 5 or 6 pounds. Like, it was huge. Like, you had a wingspan the size of my arms, for Christ's sakes, and then sitting there flapping to get out. But it was totally still with the piece of plywood on top, because it was like dark stuck. It was like, I don't know what's going on, but yeah.
Dude, what?
Yeah, they were awful. They were probably also drunk, because that was it was probably like 11 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Of course they were drunk.
Wow.
Do you hear I could go along the lines of the monkeys. They say more dominant monkeys are more alcoholic. Have you heard that?
No, I don't
I
hear
have.
alcoholic monkeys.
Yeah, they have them in
Really?
South America and India, right?
Yeah,
Are those the ones that take all the tourist stuff?
Yeah, they'll
Those little
start
Steeler ones
drinking.
that smoke cigarettes and stuff?
Yeah, they're more of the
They're
alpha.
more alcoholic.
Did you hear though that
Yeah, we're great influences, by the way.
it might have been that Tesla with the pigeons? Like, everybody said he loved pigeons, but what if they really were carrying messages, like pigeons, message in a bottle? Like, that is one theory, that he was actually using the pigeons because everybody thought it was a weird fascination with pigeons, but he could have been actually like tying messages to the pigeons to carry it.
Well,
You
yeah,
think
but
he
I
was
mean,
setting
even the
off a signal
fascination
for
wouldn't have
homing?
been weird because of their homing ability.
They'd be like the drone of the day, though. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It'd be like, hey, if I need to carry a message with the drone, I'll use a pigeon. You know? It
Wow.
could
Yeah,
have
no, I
been
mean, that's
true.
how they used to send messages like that in war. I mean, why not? Carrier pigeons. It's like a real thing.
Yeah, I don't think, I know Tesla was weird and crazy, but I don't think he was like how people say he was in love with pigeons. Yeah, I think he appreciated pigeons, but I think he was sending messages with pigeons.
Mm.
Could be.
It's something to, yeah.
But asking for money with pigeons.
The New York Tower, he was on top, and they'd always come on top, and he would send them off the top.
Like,
So
what would he say to them? Like, take this to JP Morgan's office? Like, what would he say?
It would be a messaging. I don't know how he would do it, but it would be a clandestine way.
They should do a study on high voltage and, is it rot your brain? Because there's a lot of people who get done doing this stuff and their brain is completely mush. And then their whole life has changed. They do weird things and then they show up in public. You know what I mean? And just like they would give rumor about Tesla or somebody else.
There are inherent dangers of doing what we're doing. And that's why we're trying to figure out safe and efficient ways of doing it. Because if you just jump into it and don't know what you're doing, like Don Smith started having seizures in his later life because he's around these huge electromagnetic fields, and they'll have an influence on you, and you have to be cautious of this. There is hazard getting into high power, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be addressed. If you don't know what you're doing, look at what happened to Don Smith. He literally started degrading in life because he was subjecting himself to these high fields to learn about it for us. And his health, he started having seizures, started having to drool from his mouth and clean it with a towel every time he presented, but he was still presenting and telling us how to do it. but he had to subject himself to those hazards, and there are hazards.
My understanding was that the one of the main operational guys at Lockheed Martin was fairly recently diagnosed with, something to do with propulsion.
Well,
I mean, that's all I'm going to say on the subject. I don't really know more than that, to be real. But
Lockheed Martin, when it comes to propulsion, is going to be your skunk works.
Yeah. Well, like I put the tidbit out there so you could Google it and see more about what I'm saying.
I live down the
There's
street.
a whole thing about it. Yeah.
I'll just say, like, Lockheed Martin's right down the street from me.
And you were having drones a couple weeks ago or something like that?
Well, yeah, they were starting to list the East Coast side, but I'll also be honest, like at the same time, I did have strep throat, and I tried to just be a man and battle through it without antibiotics, and I should have went to the VA like I was supposed to and get antibiotics to fight it, and it gave me side effects of staying up like 3 days in a row, and I would hear buzzing sounds. So I never actually saw any of these things, but I heard it. But I think I was like hearing buzzing because of the side effects of strep throat.
Oh,
yeah.
That's
it was
good.
Crazy.
That's good awareness. Self-awareness goes a long way.
Yeah. Like at the time, though, you're up 3 days straight. You're hearing buzzing sounds and stuff, and you don't know what's going on. And I should have just gotten antibiotics, but yeah, it's funny how your brain can trick you. But the East Coast was full, like up and down, and in the past, not from that, but I have seen UFOs, I have, but not that time. I heard it, but it could have been a side effect of strep throat.
That's fair.
I never got it. Yeah, I never got any video. But it was like humming, and I was like, oh my goodness, what is going on? So I don't know if it was, I don't know either way.
So what's your thoughts on that car that runs off of radio waves?
I haven't seen it.
Haven't seen
you Facebook me it after this, But I mean, that's Tesla was supposedly doing that too, right?
So I think he's got a secondary system in there somewhere. I don't think it's
You
pure.
think he's actually doing it though?
I don't know. He doesn't need to pull much.
I have to see it because I have no idea. But does it look legit, like from what you know?
He hasn't released anything that shows any specifics of what's going on in there.
Yeah, that's always a red flag.
Yeah.
People historically have been very happy to pop the hood once they go public. They're like, here it is.
Yeah.
Well,
a little off.
In order for us all to buy it, he's going to have to, because you got a lot of people talking, oh, you could just pull the energy out of the air. Well, yeah, frequency will do give it some energy, but we're talking like 3 volts. You know what I mean? In order to convert that to something that's usable, that's going to take a lot. You know what I mean? You can have like, I don't know, 1,000 volts coming out of a Tesla coil. Converting that is a pain in the butt. So if you're talking like 3 volts, we're not talking about hardly anything. So
if the device is small enough
to show it,
right? But so if a battery is 1.75 volts, right, like just a regular standard cell battery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if your device is small enough and it's capable of pulling, say, 3 volts, right, out of thin air, and then you have a bunch of them in a cell configuration, then it does become usable.
Mm-hmm.
So, it really depends on how big it is as to how practically usable it is. Because, there's obviously, once something becomes such a complicated system and so large that its intake is not worth its output, that's sort of the curve of use, right? But when something's compact.
Yeah, but he's going to have to deal with the rate of filling capacitors all the time if you get something like that from the air. And that's going to depend on the frequency itself. So I don't know exactly how he's going to pull that off just from the radio waves. I mean, don't get me wrong. We take radio waves and get plasma out of them with another coil. That's not a problem. It's just the rate of exchange that he gets. So he has to have a secondary conversion system that works better than what we're used to seeing, no matter how he does it.
Well, when we talked on this subject like the other day, it was this or a similar subject. I mean, we kind of said, probably not, but not that it's not possible or theoretically possible, but more that he just probably didn't do it. I think that's kind of where we went with it the other day. I don't know that my stance has particularly changed since then, but I mean, another hypothetical on it too is if it's picking up ambient waveforms and making that into usable power, if you think about having like these ambient waveforms like surf the outside of a field and then have enough to get pulled in and compressed, then technically why not? Like surfing the end and just getting caught up. Maybe, but I mean, seems like an inefficient way to do it.
That he's going to have a conversion. You got to take high frequency, high voltage, and change it to low frequency, higher amps, right? And then depending on where you fall in that field, you know what I mean, you have usable power, and that's really what it comes down to. And then you don't have to worry about how fast you fill your caps because they'll fill instantly. So that's what I mean. He has to have some sort of conversion method because.
Well, I think that's what Jarvis was kind of getting at the other day, in order to sort of like rectify that energy, right? That's where the door closing and opening comes in, right? So, you close it, it builds up, pop, you let it go, you hold it in a capacitor, pop, you let it go, you hold it in a capacitor. Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of where, that comes in, I think. You just got to let it build up or else you don't have enough, right?
Yeah, no. And the whole buildup thing is the heat in there that creates your amps in order to convert the field. So, yeah, you got to get it right. I mean, I won't say it's impossible. That's for sure. I just want to see exactly how he's doing it.
Sounds like a tuning dynamic to me is really more what it is. It's just a matter of the tuning.
Oh, it's very painful tuning. Let me just tell you that. It's not easily understood. It's easy to say it. You know what I mean?
It's easy to say, and right. I'm just saying it's a matter of the tuning. That's not to say that it's easy, but that's what it's a matter of.
Yeah, but try to think that there's the clapper. That's the way I like to think of it because I love it, the bell. But you get it, right? The clapper frequency has nothing to do with the end frequency, but it has to be in resonance to get the soldiers over the bridge that you talked about, Joe.
Yep. Over the bridge.
The more it's in resonance, the better, but you don't have to have off the bat a high frequency because you're going to get that in the down the line. It's easy.
Yeah, it kind of works like a cue, like a line, where if it's wider in some parts and choked at other parts with a gate that you have to be waved on to come through. And then it's just a matter of like flowing like that, and
I would say
you get everybody into the auditorium, then you could put on whatever show you want with them once they're all there.
I
know that's a stupid analogy, but
no, that's good. It's more of a technique. That's you know what I mean? It's a sequence of events that happens, like you say. It's not
sequence of events.
Yes, it's a sequence. But when you get the sequence right, you wind up with something much more than what you put in.
Well, we're just wondering because he says he used the radio frequencies from the air. So in order to make the system run a car. So we're talking about a massive application.
Without seeing it, I mean, I have heard of what they call energy sucking antennas, but in order to do that, the idea is more of a transception. Like you can have a broadcast and you can have a receiver, but transception is like old school Mikey talk, Mike, you know what I'm saying? Like the walkie-talkie. I'm sorry, the walkie-talkie. The backstage of that is transception, where you didn't have to have a satellite or anything in the air to transceive. And transception is different from just broadcasting or just receiving a signal. The transception is the symbiotic relationship. So the transception is important there.
Right, because if you have 3 people with a walkie-talkie and 2 people are talking on it, but the third one's tuned into the same frequency, it doesn't matter if he's talking or not. He's still in the middle receiving that signal.
And
So
he could be a 10-mile radius is pretty huge. You could get 10 miles on a walkie-talkie just by transception. Get me there? So not broadcasting and not receiving, but transception. So when you're ringing the bell, you want that symbiotic relationship to have a transception relationship.
So if you're picking up on these transceptions, so to speak,
Yes.
if you're picking up on that, and then you're using your own means of amplification, then if you're amplifying and then holding, building up and then releasing and then holding in capacitance, through like those series of events. I mean, I guess, like, again, this is all talk, and
but that's why it
difficult
takes, that's why it takes the difference, though, as the next stage is the difference between receivers and broadcasters. Because when you have a radio that broadcasts out, you have numerous receivers, but this is not black and white transceivers, receivers. It's gray. It's a transceiver. So you need to know how to transceive those signals.
Well, that comes down to picking up multiple channels at a time.
Yes.
Is what that kind of boils down to. So it's can't be tuned into any one thing. It's got to be tuned into a whole bunch.
But it's a technique is what I'm getting at. It's a technique of the reception.
Okay.
Interesting.
I'm in.
All right, guys, it's been about 3.5 hours. I think we're getting into the end now. So
I can't believe it's been 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
That's right.
That's right. Thank
All
you,
right,
chat.
guys. I'm going to end everything now. So I want to thank everybody in the chat. You guys have been great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jarvis, guys. Been awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
All
you,
right,
guys.
peace and love.